The sun is a heavy molten weight pressing down upon the valleys of Provence, but here, inside the sanctuary of 3-foot-thick stone walls, the world has gone silent and cool. It is the year of our Lord 1250. You stand in the centre of a kitchen that smells of ancient earth dried summer savoury, and the suffocatingly sweet aroma of a fresh harvest. Before you sits a massive, wide-mouthed terracotta vat, filled to the brim with the collective soul of 1,000,000 wildflowers. This is the nectar of the Luberon, gathered during the long, shimmering days of July. And now, as the shadows begin to stretch across the floor, it is time for the stirring. You reach out, your fingers brushing the rough, unglazed rim of the vessel. The clay is cool, a sharp contrast to the liquid sun it contains. You take up the stirring paddle, a heavy limb of olive wood, smoothed by the palms of your grandfather and his father before him. As you plunge the wood into the amber depths, the resistance is immediate and profound. The honey does not want to move. It is thick, viscous, and stubborn, holding on to the heat of the afternoon with a physical intensity. You lean your weight into the first turn. Slowly, the surface breaks. A heavy golden fold ripples outward, moving with the glacial grace of melting wax. Outside the small, deep-set window, the world is a blur of violet and gold. The lavender fields are in their final, frantic bloom, and the air out there is a cacophony of buzzing wings. But in here, there is only the rhythmic, wet sound of the paddle moving through the sweetness. Schlup, schlup, schloop. It is the heartbeat of the cottage. With every rotation, you are folding the air into the sugar, watching as the translucent amber begins to cloud ever so slightly, turning into a creamy, opaque gold. You can smell the specific biographies of the flowers, the sharp medicinal hit of wild rosemary, the delicate perfume of thyme, and the deep, dark musk of the forest edge. This is not merely a task, it is a ritual of preservation. In 1250, honey is the only light in the darkness of a bitter winter. It is medicine for the throat, a treat for the solstice, and the currency of the village. As you stir, your mind drifts. You feel the grit of the stone floor beneath your soles, the way the lime wash on the walls catches the dying light, turning the room into a glowing amber chamber. You are a part of the cycle. The bees have done their work, the sun has provided the fire, and now your hands provide the motion. The paddle creates deep, swirling galaxies in the vat, spirals of light that catch the sunbeams and throw flickering patterns against the ceiling beams. Your breathing begins to synchronize with the motion of your arms. Push, pull, rotate. The honey resists, then yields, then flows. It is a dance between the harvester and the harvest. You watch a single air bubble rise slowly from the bottom, struggling through the density before popping on the surface with a tiny sticky sigh. The scent intensifies, filling your lungs until you feel as though you're breathing liquid gold. There is no hurry here. The Middle Ages do not know the frantic pace of the future. Here the only clock is the sun's descent and the thickening of the honey. You are untethered from time, anchored only by the weight of the wood in your hands and the cooling stone of your home. The stir continues, a slow hypnotic journey into the very heart of summer's end. The afternoon shadows deepen, stretching like long, thin fingers across the uneven river-stone floor. The light, once a bright and aggressive yellow, has ripened into a deep, burnt orange. As you continue to move the olive wood paddle, your muscles settle into a dull, familiar ache that feels more like a grounded connection than a burden. In this year of 125, your body is the primary engine of the world. There is a profound simplicity in this labor. You are not just stirring a vat. You are witnessing the slow transition of energy from the frantic life of the hive into a stillness that will last for years. Honey is the only thing in this world that does not die, and as you turn the paddle, you feel as though you are handling eternity itself. The texture of the honey is changing under your touch. When you first began, it was loose and warm from the hives, flowing with a certain chaotic freedom. Now, as the cool air of the stone cottage begins to penetrate the terracotta, the liquid is thickening. It pulls at the paddle with a renewed strength. Each rotation requires a deliberate shift of your weight, a leaning of your shoulder into the wood. The sound has changed too. The sharp, wet splashes have softened into a low, rhythmic thrum, a heavy, sliding sound that mimics the movement of a deep river. You watch the ribbons of amber fold over one another. They create intricate, temporary architectures on the surface, ridges and valleys of gold that stand for a few seconds before being swallowed back into the depths. You look around your kitchen, the sanctuary where this alchemy takes place. High above, tucked between the blackened oak rafters, hang bundles of drying herbs, sage, marjoram, and long stalks of lavender tied with rough twine. They are brittle and grey, their scent mingling with the overpowering sweetness of the vat. On a small wooden shelf sits a collection of empty ceramic jars waiting to be filled. They are humble things, handmade by the village potter, but in the coming months they will be the most precious items in the cellar. In 1250, the sweetness of honey is more than a flavour. It is a vital spark against the encroaching damp of autumn and the bone-chilling frost of the Provençal winter. A single honeybee, perhaps a straggler that followed the scent of the harvest inside, zigzags through a shaft of light. Its wings make a frantic, high-pitched whine that sounds out of place in the heavy silence of the cottage. It circles the vat once, twice, drawn to the concentrated essence of its own life's work. Before finding its way back toward the open door and the cooling fields, you watch it go, a tiny speck of gold vanishing into the violet haze of the lavender rose. Outside, the world is preparing for sleep. The sheep in the distance are being driven toward the folds, their bells clanking softly, a metallic music that carries easily through the thin, dry air. You pause for a moment, resting your forearms on the rim of the vat. The heat from the honey radiates upward, warming your face. You look closely at the surface, observing the tiny flecks of wax and the occasional grain of pollen that have escaped the initial straining. These are the hallmarks of the wild proof that this liquid came from the bellies of flowers and the tireless transit of the wind. You reach down and touch a stray drop that has escaped onto the rim. It is tacky and warm when you press it to your tongue. The flavor is an explosion of complexity. It isn't just sweet. It is bright, acidic, and deep. It tastes of the sun-baked limestone, the morning dew on the rosemary, and the very dust of the road. As you resume your stirring, the rhythm returns. The paddle moves in a perfect circle, over and over, carving a path through the golden sea. You find yourself falling into a trance-like state, a waking dream where the only reality is the resistance of the honey and the coolness of the stone. The cottage seems to breathe with you. The walls, which have stood since the time of your ancestors, seem to absorb the sweet scent, becoming seasoned by the harvest year after year. You are part of a long lineage of keepers, a chain of hands that have moved this wood through this gold for centuries. In the stillness of 1350, the past and the future dissolve into this single, unfolding moment of the great stirring. The light continues to fade, but the vat seems to glow with an inner fire, a captured sun held within the heart of the stone. The twilight begins to seep through the small, thick window, turning the edges of the room into soft charcoal. The golden hour has passed, giving way to the blue hour, where the Provençal sky turns a deep, bruised purple. Inside the cottage, the lack of light only heightens your other senses. The smell of the honey has become heavier, almost intoxicating as it cools and settles. It is a scent that feels thick enough to touch, a mixture of caramelized sunlight and the wild, peppery bite of the mountainside. You can no longer see the individual ribbons of gold as clearly as before, but you can feel them through the handle of the olive wood paddle. The honey is becoming velvety, a dense mass of concentrated life that requires your full concentration to move. Your movements have become entirely instinctive. You don't need to look at the vat to know where the paddle is. You feel the weight of the liquid pressing against the wood, a constant, stubborn pressure. The silence of the 13th century evening is profound. There are no machines, no distant hum of traffic, no artificial lights flickering in the periphery. There is only the sound of your own breathing and the rhythmic, heavy swish of the honey being turned. This silence is not empty. It is full of the presence of the stone, the wood, and the earth. It is a silence that allows you to hear the subtle changes in the honey's texture, the way it clings to the sides of the terracotta, the way it sighs as it folds over itself. In the corner of the kitchen, the hearth is cold, but the smell of old wood smoke lingers in the rafters, providing a sharp, earthy bass note to the floral symphony of the honey. You think of the winter months ahead, when the mistral wind will howl through the cracks in the door and the hills will be stripped of their colour. In those dark days, this vat will be your treasure. You will spoon this golden light into bowls of porridge or mix it with warm wine and herbs to soothe a child's cough. Every drop you stir now is a deposit of health and warmth against the coming cold. The importance of this labour hums in your bones. In 1250, you are not just a maker of food, you are a steward of survival. You shift your stance, the river stones beneath your feet feeling smooth and solid. These stones have been polished by generations of beekeepers walking this same path from the door to the vat. You feel a sense of companionship with those who came before you. They too stood in this cooling kitchen as the light failed, their arms aching with the same productive fatigue. They too watched the way the honey caught the last of the light, marveling at how something so beautiful could be so essential. The continuity of the task brings a deep sense of peace. In a world that can be harsh and unpredictable, where harvests can fail and kings can fall, the honey remains constant. The bees will always find the lavender, and the honey will always need to be stirred. A cricket begins to chirp somewhere near the threshold, its sharp, rhythmic song punctuating the stillness. It is a reminder that while the sun has set, the world is still very much alive. The lavender outside is no longer visible, but you can feel its presence in the cooling breeze that wafts through the open door, carrying the scent of the evening dew. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the mixture of cold mountain air and warm, sweet nectar. The honey is nearly ready for its first rest. You give the paddle one last, slow, deliberate turn, feeling the incredible density of the liquid as it resists the wood. It is thick, rich, and perfect. As you lift the paddle out, the honey clings to it in a heavy, glistening coat, falling back into the vat in a single, unbroken stream that looks like molten glass in the dim light. The first stage of the stirring is complete, and the cottage is now fully embraced by the quiet of the Provençal night. The indigo blanket of night has finally draped itself over the hills of Provence, leaving the stone kitchen in a state of soft velvet darkness. You set the wooden paddle aside, resting it against the lip of the vat. The honey continues to move for a few moments, a slow, rotating ghost of your labour, before finally settling into a glassy, undisturbed mirror. Even in the dimness, the surface reflects the faint starlight trickling through the window, appearing like a dark, enchanted pool at the bottom of a cave. Your arms feel light now, released from the constant pull of the viscosity, and you take a moment to simply exist in the silence of the year 1250. This is the pause that every artisan knows, the moment where the work begins to take on a life of its own. As the honey rests, the tiny air bubbles you have folded into the mixture begin their slow vertical journey to the surface, and the flavors of 1,000 different flowers begin to marry. You can almost feel the chemistry of the earth settling in the vat. This honey is a map of the region. The dry heat of the rocky outcrops where the thyme grows, the damp shade of the valleys where the mint thrives, and the vast purple plains of lavender that define the soul of this land. If you're finding peace in this rhythmic journey back to the 13th century, perhaps you would like to join us for more sensory escapes. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and ring the bell to ensure you never miss a moment of historical rest. Your support helps us keep the hearth fires burning in cottages like this one. You move toward the small hearth, though you do not light a fire tonight. The residual warmth of the day is still trapped within the thick limestone walls, making the air feel like a soft embrace. You reach for a linen cloth woven by hand from the flax grown in the neighboring village. It is rough to the touch, smelling of lye and fresh air. Carefully, you drape it over the mouth of the terracotta vat to protect the liquid gold from the dust of the night. This cloth is the final seal, the good night to the harvest. Standing there in the dark, you listen to the house. The stones settle with a faint, imperceptible creak. A breeze ruffles the thatched eaves. You are miles away from the nearest town, tucked into a fold of the earth that time seems to have forgotten. There is no urgency to be anywhere else. In this century, the world ends at the edge of the forest and begins again at the garden gate. You wash your hands in a basin of cool well water, watching the sticky residue of the honey dissolve and swirl into the dark. Your skin still carries the scent, a perfume of wildflowers and beeswax that will linger until morning. You are ready for sleep, a deep and dreamless rest earned by the honest weight of the paddle and the sweetness of the earth. The deep quiet of the Provençal night is not a void, it is a presence. As you stand in the darkness of your stone cottage, the world outside seems to have been painted in shades of silver and charcoal. The moon, a bright sliver of bone, hangs over the Luberon, casting a ghostly light upon the lavender fields you walked earlier this day. Inside, the cottage is a cocoon. The scent of the honey, now covered by the linen cloth, has become more muted, settling into a low, earthy hum that grounds the room. You find your way to the small wooden stool by the window, the grain of the wood familiar and smooth beneath your palms. In 1250, the night is a sacred time. It is the boundary of human endeavor. Without the flicker of a candle, for wax is precious and saved for the winter or the church, you are guided by the natural rhythms of the earth. You sit for a moment, looking out at the silhouette of the hills. You think of the bees huddled together in their straw skeps and hollowed logs on the edge of the woods. They are vibrating in the dark, maintaining the warmth of the queen, dreaming of the nectar that will flow with the next rising sun. You feel a kinship with them. You are both workers of the sun, now resting in the cool shadows of the moon. The thick walls of the cottage act like a thermal heart. They absorb the intense heat of the day and are now slowly, almost imperceptibly, breathing it back into the room. This is the magic of Provence stone. It protects you from the scorching brilliance of the afternoon and cushions you against the sharp chill of the midnight air. You reach out and touch the wall beside you. The lime wash feels slightly chalky, a tactile reminder of the minerals that make up this land. This cottage was not just built on the land, it was built of it. Every stone was hauled from the surrounding slopes, every beam of oak felled in the nearby forest. To live here is to be folded into the landscape. Your thoughts drift back to the vat. In the morning, the honey will have changed again. The cooling process will have increased its density, making the next stirring even more demanding. It is a slow transformation, a lesson in patience that the modern world has long forgotten. In the 13th century, there is no fast. The bread must rise, the wool must be spun, and the honey must settle. This slowness is not an inconvenience, it is the fundamental pace of life. It allows you to notice the way the starlight glints off the copper ladle hanging on the wall, or the way the dry grass whispers against the stone threshold. You find yourself breathing in time with the wind. The mistral is quiet tonight, replaced by a gentle breeze that carries the cooling moisture of the river. You can hear the distant, lonely hoot of a tawny owl hunting in the olive groves. It is a lonely sound, but it isn't frightening. It is simply the voice of the night. Your eyes have fully adjusted to the dark, and you can see the faint outlines of your world, the stack of firewood by the hearth, the heavy oak table, the silhouette of the honey vat. Everything is in its place. The work is done for now, and the sweetness is safe. You feel a profound sense of sufficiency. You have enough. You are enough. The earth has provided its gold, and you have provided the care to keep it. The journey of the stirring has only just begun. But for tonight, the stillness is the greatest gift of all. The transition from the deep midnight into the pre-dawn hours is a subtle shift of color rather than sound. The air inside the stone cottage has reached its coolest point, and the scent of the honey has been compressed by the night air into a dense, sugary perfume that clings to the very rafters. You rise from your rest before the sun has even breached the horizon. In 1250, the first light is a call to action, but it is a quiet, reverent beginning. Your boots make a soft scuffing sound on the stone floor as you move toward the vat. You peel back the linen cloth, and the surface of the honey greets you like a sleeping giant, smooth, taut, and reflecting the pale grey light of the coming morning. You take up the olive wood paddle once more this morning. The honey is noticeably thicker. The cool of the night has tempered it, turning the liquid gold into something more akin to soft resin. As you push the wood into the mass, the resistance is immense. It requires the full strength of your back and legs to move the first layer. This is the stage where the honey begins to set, where the sugars begin to form their microscopic crystals, and your stirring ensures that these crystals remain fine and smooth. You are sculpting the texture of the winter to come. Each movement of the paddle is a struggle against the honey's desire to become solid, a gentle negotiation between the wild energy of the nectar and the structured peace of the jar. The first rays of the sun begin to hit the upper slopes of the Luberon Mountains, visible through the doorway. The sky turns from a bruised plum to a dusty rose. You watch as the light creeps down the hills, slowly illuminating the rows of lavender that are still heavy with dew. The world is waking up, but here in the kitchen you're still held in a pocket of timelessness. The sound of the stirring, a thick rhythmic thrum, is the only clock that matters. You feel the heat returning to your muscles as you work, the cool morning air playing across your damp forehead. This is the balance of the beekeeper's life, the heat of the labor and the coolness of the stone. As the light finally spills over the threshold and hits the honey, the vat seems to ignite. The amber liquid catches the horizontal rays, glowing with a fierce inner radiance that fills the small room with a golden hue. You can see the patterns you're carving with the paddle, deep, swirling grooves that look like the rings of an ancient tree. It is a moment of pure sensory beauty. The world outside may be vast and complex, filled with the politics of kings and the movements of armies, but within these 4 stone walls, life is reduced to the most essential elements: wood, stone, sun, and sweetness. Sleepy History with Wesley is a sleep history storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. The sun has now cleared the mountain peaks, and the kitchen is no longer a place of shadows. It is a workshop of light. The intensity of the morning sun in Provence is a physical presence, but the thick limestone walls of your 13th century cottage act as a shield, keeping the interior temperature steady and soft. You continue the stirring, feeling the honey yield to the paddle with a heavy, satisfying groan. The liquid has reached a state of perfect tension. It is fluid enough to move, yet dense enough to hold the shape of the swirl for several long seconds before smoothing over. You are folding the very essence of the Provençal summer into a form that will endure. As you work, you notice the fine details of your surroundings that only become visible in this sharp, direct light. You see the chisel marks on the stone sink, the silver-grey patina on the oak shelves, and the way the beeswax polish on the table has captured the dust of the fields. Everything in this room has been made by a human hand or shaped by the passage of years. There is no waste here, no cheapness. Every tool, from the terracotta vat to the hand-carved paddle, is an heirloom in the making. This is the weight of history that you carry in every rotation of your arms. If this journey into the quiet corners of the past is bringing you a sense of calm, we invite you to stay a while longer. Please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. Your engagement helps us continue to craft these historical escapes, bringing the peaceful rhythms of the ancient world into your modern life. Share your thoughts in the comments about which era or landscape you would like to visit next. The rhythm of the stirring becomes a form of prayer. In the year 1250, there is no separation between the sacred and the mundane. The act of preparing food, of tending the bees, of maintaining the home, is all part of a larger divine order. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for the abundance of the season. The harvest was good, the lavender was plentiful, and the bees were strong. As you look into the swirling amber depths, you see the reflection of a life well lived, a life of labor, of stillness, and of an unshakable connection to the earth beneath your feet. The paddle continues its slow circular dance, carving a path through the gold as the morning deepens and the world outside begins its busy, buzzing day. The heat of the morning begins to climb, radiating off the dry, pebbled earth outside, but within the cottage, the air remains stagnant and cool, smelling of old shadows and new honey. You have been stirring for what feels like hours, yet time has lost its edge. In 1250, the concept of an hour is a loose, fluid thing dictated more by the movement of a shadow across the floor than the ticking of a gear. Your arms move with a mechanical grace, the muscles in your back rippling in a slow, rhythmic wave. The honey is now a deep, opaque, tawny color, having lost the translucent clarity of the initial pour. It is becoming creamed, a process of controlled crystallization that will give it a texture like soft butter. This is the secret of the master beekeeper, knowing exactly when to stir and when to let the liquid rest, ensuring that the grains of sugar remain so small they melt instantly upon the tongue. You look down into the vat and see the history of the year swirling before you. There, in that streak of dark forest green amber, is the memory of the early spring rains and the honeydew from the ancient oaks. In that lighter, almost white ribbon is the ghost of the rosemary that bloomed along the rocky ridges in April, and dominating it all is the golden purple soul of the lavender, the floral heart of Provence. It is a liquid ledger of the weather, the wind, and the industry of the hives. You think of the millions of flights the bees took to fill this single vessel, the thousands of miles flown, the millions of blossoms visited. The sheer scale of the labor contained within this terracotta jar is staggering. It makes your own effort with the paddle feel small, yet essential. You are the final architect of their work, the one who gives their collective effort a lasting shape. The sound of the kitchen has shifted as the village wakes. Far off, you can hear the faint ring of a blacksmith's hammer against an anvil, a rhythmic metallic punctuation to the morning air. Closer by, a neighbor's cart creaks along the rutted track, the wooden wheels groaning under a load of hay. These sounds reach you as if from another world, softened by the thick stone walls of your sanctuary. You are tucked away in a pocket of history, a silent observer of the turning year. The interior of the cottage is a study in textures. The rough grain of the olive wood handle, the cool smoothness of the glazed ceramic, the dry prickle of the herbs overhead. You find yourself focusing on the small things, a single drop of honey that has crystallized on the rim, glowing like a tiny misplaced jewel. You lean in closer, the steam of the honey rising to meet you. It is a heavy, floral vapor that seems to coat the inside of your throat, sweetening every breath. You realize that you are no longer just stirring, you are being moved by the process itself. The resistance of the honey has become a dialogue. When it pulls, you yield. When it flows, you guide. It is a meditation on persistence. In the world of 1250, nothing is instant. Everything worth having, be it a harvest of grain, a woven garment, or a vat of fine honey, requires a sustained physical commitment. This labor is what gives the honey its value. It is seasoned with the salt of your skin and the focus of your mind. As the sun climbs higher, hitting the midpoint of the morning, you prepare to finish this session of the stirring. The honey has reached a consistency that is both heavy and velvety, holding the deep, swirling patterns of the paddle with a stubborn pride. You lift the wood one last time, watching the thick golden rope of honey coil upon itself on the surface, creating a beautiful rising mound that slowly sinks back into the hole. You feel a profound sense of accomplishment. The sweetness of the earth is being tamed, prepared, and perfected. You drape the linen cloth back over the vat, sealing in the scent and the stillness. The cottage is quiet once more, a cool stone heart beating in the center of the sun-drenched landscape. Sleepy History with Wesley combines the power of AI to reimagine fictional historical tales, bringing peace, relaxation, and positive emotional values to our listeners. The high sun of midday now beats relentlessly upon the tiled roof of the cottage, but inside the temperature remains a constant earthy cool. The light has changed from the long, searching rays of the morning to a sharp, vertical brightness that pools on the floor directly beneath the small windows. You stand before the vat, resting your hands upon its rounded belly. The terracotta has absorbed the subtle warmth of the honey, creating a living heat that feels like the pulse of the house itself. You remove the linen cover once more. The honey has settled during its brief rest, its surface now as taut and reflective as a drum skin, a mirror of deep ochre that seems to pull the very air into its depths. As you begin the next round of stirring, the physical demand of the task reaches its peak. The honey has cooled further, and the microscopic crystals are knitting together, creating a density that feels almost like wet sand or thick clay. You have to plant your feet firmly on the river stones, feeling the slight grit and the ancient cooling dampness through the soles of your shoes. With every rotation of the olive wood paddle, you are fighting against the natural inclination of the sugar to solidify. You are the force that keeps it smooth, the hand that ensures the honey remains a spreadable, luxurious cream rather than a hard, jagged block. This is the art of the 1250 beekeeper to intervene at the exact moment where nature meets the hearth. The kitchen is filled with the low, grinding sound of wood against viscous liquid. It is a primitive, satisfying sound that echoes off the lime-washed walls. You find yourself noticing the way the light catches the imperfections in the glass of a small jar on the shelf. Hand-blown, green-tinted, and filled with tiny bubbles in this century, perfection is found in the irregular, in the mark of the tool, and in the thumbprint of the maker. You see these same marks in your honey, the way the ripples aren't perfectly symmetrical, the way the color shifts slightly from one side of the vat to the other depending on which forest edge the bees frequented that particular week. It is an honest product of a wild world. Your mind wanders to the village beyond your stone walls. By now the harvesters in the grain fields will be pausing for their midday meal, seeking the shade of a lone oak tree or the lee of a stone wall. They will be breaking crusty loaves of rye bread, perhaps wishing for a smear of the very gold you are currently tilling. In 1250, honey is the great prize of the table. It is the reward for the bitter winter and the sweat of the summer. You feel a sense of responsibility to them and to the seasons. If you fail to stir, the honey will be coarse. If you stir too fast, you will break the delicate floral notes. You must move with the patience of the mountain itself. As you push the paddle through the heavy mass, you think about the lavender outside. The fields are currently a shimmering haze of purple heat. The scent so strong it is almost a physical weight in the air. The bees are still there, working the late-blooming stalks, their wings a constant vibration that fills the valley. You are an extension of that vibration. Your work here in the cool shadows is the final movement of the symphony that began with the first bud of spring. The paddle moves in its relentless circle, creating deep, swirling valleys in the amber. You watch as the light plays across the ridges of the honey, turning the vat into a miniature landscape of mountains and rivers. The fatigue in your arms has moved from a sharp sting to a dull, humming glow. It is a good tiredness, the kind that anchors a person to the world. You are not just a ghost in a stone room, you are a participant in the deep time of Provence. You are performing a task that has been done since the Roman legions marched these roads, and one that will continue long after the kings of France are dust. There is a profound comfort in this continuity. The stone walls, the wooden paddle, the ceramic vat, they are all part of a silent language of survival and beauty. You take a deep breath, the scent of the honey filling your head with visions of summer meadows and golden light. The stirring continues, a slow, heavy dance of persistence and grace in the heart of the 13th century. The sun has shifted past its zenith, and the light in the cottage has grown more mellow, casting long, slanted shadows of the hanging herbs across the plaster walls. The air is thick, almost tangible, as if the honey itself has evaporated into a golden mist that fills every corner of the room. You find yourself leaning into the paddle with a renewed focus, the weight of your body providing the momentum that your tired arms now crave. The honey is at its most stubborn now. It has become a heavy, swirling tide of cream gold that resists every inch of your progress. Yet there is a profound pleasure in this resistance. It is the feeling of substance, the feeling of a harvest so rich and so dense that it demands your absolute presence. In this quiet hour of 1250, the world outside feels like a distant memory. The frantic buzzing of the lavender fields, though still occurring just beyond the threshold, has been filtered through the thick stone into a low-frequency hum, a background vibration that aligns with the beating of your own heart. You look down at your hands stained with the dark resins of the hive and the pale dust of the limestone. These are the hands of a keeper, a protector of the sweetness. You notice how the honey clings to the olive wood, forming thick, translucent beads that catch the light like raw amber jewels. Every time you lift the paddle to reset your stroke, the honey stretches into long, shimmering threads that refuse to break, a testament to its purity and strength. The silence of the cottage is a living thing. It isn't the absence of noise, but a fullness of sound, the creak of the floorboards as you shift your weight, the wet, heavy slide of the liquid against the clay walls of the vat, and the occasional snap of a dry twig in the hearth. You think of the centuries of beekeepers who have stood on this very spot. To them as to you, this vat was the center of the world for a few days each year. They knew the same ache in the shoulders, the same sweet burn in the lungs, and the same quiet satisfaction of watching the wild nectar transform into a domestic treasure. You are walking in their footsteps, carving the same circles into the same gold, bound together by the unchanging nature of the bee and the flower. As the honey thickens, the floral scents seem to intensify rather than fade. The cooling process has trapped the volatile oils of the thyme and rosemary, and each turn of the paddle releases a new burst of fragrance. It is as if you are uncovering layers of the landscape with every movement. One rotation brings the scent of the high mountain air, crisp and herbal. The next brings the heavy, musk-filled aroma of the valley floor at dusk. You are not just stirring honey, you are blending the geography of Provence into a single vessel. The vat is a map made of sugar and sunlight, a record of every hill and hollow within the flight path of your hives. You pause to wipe a bead of sweat from your brow with the back of your hand. The air in the kitchen is perfectly still. You look at the jars lined up on the shelf, their empty bellies waiting to be filled with this liquid light. In a few days they will be sealed with wax and stored in the cool darkness of the cellar, alongside the wheels of cheese and the jugs of wine. They represent security. In a world where the whim of a lord or the cruelty of a storm can change one's fortune in an instant, this honey is a certainty. It is a promise of flavor and health that will keep through the frost and the rain. You feel a deep, quiet pride in this. You are a provider of the most basic and beautiful of human needs. The paddle goes back into the depths. The resistance is so great now that the honey creates deep, permanent-looking furrows that only slowly fill back in. It is becoming like molten silk. You watch the way the light plays across these golden ridges, creating a hypnotic display of shadow and brilliance. Your breathing is slow and deep, synchronized with the heavy circular motion. The world may be changing out there, new kings may be crowned, new cathedrals may reach for the clouds, but here, in the year 1250, the honey must be stirred. The sun continues its slow journey toward the western sea, and you continue yours, one golden circle at a time, anchored in the sweetness of the earth. The afternoon has matured into a deep, honeyed stillness that matches the contents of the vat. The shadows of the lavender stalks outside have begun to tilt and lengthen, casting thin, skeletal lines across the parched earth of the garden. Inside the cottage, the air has become a sanctuary of scent. The volatile oils of the wild flowers, trapped within the cooling sugar, have been agitated by the paddle until they saturate the very stone of the walls. It is a heavy, somber perfume, less like the bright, flighty scent of a fresh bouquet and more like the deep, resonant chord of a cathedral organ. In the year 1250, such smells are the markers of the turning seasons, as recognizable as the smell of wet wool in winter or the scent of scorched grass in the height of July. Your movements have reached a state of mechanical perfection. You no longer think about the angle of the olive wood paddle or the distribution of your weight. Your body simply knows the path. The honey has reached a consistency that is truly magnificent. It has lost all its watery transparency and has become a dense, luminous cream, the color of a lion's mane in the sun. As you pull the paddle toward you, the honey rises in a thick, sculpted wave that holds its peak for a heartbeat before slowly, gracefully subsiding. This is the ribbon stage where the alchemy of the stirring is almost complete. The sugar crystals have been broken and distributed so finely that the liquid feels like velvet against the wood. You take a moment to look at the window, a small rectangle of brilliant sky set into the massive thickness of the limestone. A swallow darts across the frame, a quick dark arrow against the blue. It is a reminder of the frantic pace of the world outside, the birds nesting, the bees foraging, the peasants laboring in the distant wheat fields. But here, within the cool embrace of the stone, the pace is different. It is the pace of the earth's own slow cooling. You feel a sense of profound isolation, but it is not a lonely feeling. It is the isolation of the craftsman, the quiet space required for a masterpiece to form. In 1250, this kitchen is your universe, and the golden swirl in the vat is the celestial body around which your entire day rotates. The light begins to catch the smoke-darkened beams of the ceiling, revealing the bundles of drying savory and thyme that you hung there weeks ago. They are dusty and brittle, their essence waiting to be awakened by a winter stew. You realize that your life is a series of such preparations, gathering in the light and the heat of summer and locking it away in jars and rafters to sustain the soul during the lean months. The honey is the crown of these preparations. It is the most concentrated form of summer you possess. You think of the cold mornings in February when you will open one of the ceramic jars. The scent that will erupt from beneath the wax seal will be this very moment captured and preserved. It will be the smell of the sun on the lavender, the hum of the hives, and the cool breath of the stone. You adjust your grip on the paddle, the wood warm from the friction of your palms. You notice a small knot in the olive wood, a swirling grain that mimics the patterns you're making in the honey. Nature repeats its designs, from the growth of a tree to the flow of a liquid. You feel a deep, wordless connection to these patterns. As you push through the final resistance of the afternoon session, you feel the honey begin to tighten. It is almost ready. The labor is nearing its end for the day, but the honey will continue its slow transformation in the dark. You give the vat 3 more slow, deliberate turns, marking the conclusion of the ritual. The sound is a low, satisfied hiss as the paddle leaves the surface. You rest the tool against the wall and look at your work. The honey is a perfect, unblemished mirror of gold, a testament to the patient endurance of the year 1250. The sun has begun its slow, majestic descent toward the jagged horizon of the Luberon, and the light entering the cottage has turned a fierce, crystalline gold. It strikes the terracotta vat with such intensity that the honey seems to burn from within, a vessel of liquid fire sitting in the middle of the cool, grey room. You pick up the stirring paddle once more, feeling the familiar call of the grain against your calloused palms. This is the final session before the twilight settles in, the most crucial moment where the texture is locked into place. The honey is now so thick that each rotation of your arms feels like pulling a heavy oar through a sea of molten glass. Your breathing is deep and rhythmic, a steady bellows that fuels the fire of your labor. With every turn, you're blending the history of this landscape into a singular sweet narrative. You think of the bees that traveled to the very edge of the pine forests to find the rarest resins, and those that stayed close to home dancing among the kitchen herbs and the climbing roses by the door. All of their journeys, their thousands of miles of flight, are now being harmonized by your hand. In 1250, you are the conductor of this silent golden orchestra. The resistance of the mass is a conversation. It tells you of the dryness of the spring and the sudden, heavy rains of June. You listen to the honey through the wood of the paddle, feeling the vibrations of its secret life. If you're enjoying this immersive journey into the quiet, sun-baked life of a medieval beekeeper, please take a moment to support our work. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you find the rhythmic stirring as relaxing as we do? Your engagement allows us to continue creating these long-form sensory experiences. The cottage has become a temple of the senses. The smell of the honey is now so concentrated that you can almost taste it on the back of your tongue, a complex layering of musk, floral nectar, and the sharp, clean scent of the limestone walls. You watch the way a single beam of light filled with dancing dust motes illuminates a swirling ridge on the surface of the gold. It looks like a mountain range in miniature, a landscape of sweetness that you have carved with your own strength. The silence is profound, broken only by the heavy, wet slide of the honey and the distant, lonely call of a shepherd's horn echoing across the valley. As you work, the physical exertion brings a sense of clarity. In this moment, there is no past and no future. There is only the weight of the wood, the coolness of the stone floor, and the slow, inevitable movement of the gold. You are tethered to the earth in the most fundamental way. You realize that this honey will outlast you, that the jars you fill will be opened by hands not yet born, tasting the very same sun and lavender that you are stirring now. This is the legacy of 1250, a slow, enduring sweetness that defies the passage of time. You give the vat one last, powerful turn, watching the amber coil into a perfect, shimmering spiral before you slowly withdraw the paddle, leaving the honey to find its final, quiet rest in the cooling shadows of the evening. The long shadows of the late afternoon have begun to climb the interior walls, turning the whitewashed stone into a canvas of shifting greys and deep violets. The intense heat of the day is finally beginning to break, replaced by the first soft breath of the evening mistral as it rolls down from the high plateaus. You stand over the vat, your shadow cast long and thin across the floor, reaching almost to the cold hearth. The honey has entered a new phase of its existence. It has become set, a state of suspended animation where it is neither liquid nor solid, but a glorious heavy cream that clings to the paddle with a fierce, magnetic pull. As you begin this penultimate stirring, you can feel the microscopic crystals interlocking, creating a structural integrity that feels like soft marble. Every muscle in your arms and shoulders is alive with the hum of the day's work. In the year 1250, there is no escape from the physical reality of the world. Your body is the tool that bridges the gap between the wild bounty of nature and the survival of your kin. You feel the grit of the riverstone floor beneath your feet, the stones themselves having absorbed the day's warmth and now radiating a gentle, grounding heat. You lean forward, using the weight of your torso to drive the olive wood paddle through the resistance. The sound is different now, no longer a splash or a slide, but a deep, resonant growl as the thick mass is displaced. It is the sound of absolute density. The scent of the room has evolved. The bright floral peaks of the morning have settled into a deeper, more bass-heavy aroma. It smells of the earth itself, of the dry clay of the valley, the resinous sap of the pines and the dark hidden minerals within the limestone. This is the scent of permanence. You think of the cellar below your feet where the jars from previous years sit in the dark. That honey has become a solid crystalline treasure, its sweetness intensified by time. You are preparing this current batch to join them, to become part of the lineage of the cottage. In 1250 your wealth is measured in these jars, in the sacks of grain in the loft, and the bundles of herbs in the rafters. It is a tangible, edible security that no storm can wash away. Through the door, the lavender fields have turned a dark, bruised indigo under the setting sun. The bees have mostly returned to their hives, their work done for the day. A few stragglers still dance in the dying light, their golden bodies flashing like sparks against the purple flowers. You feel a deep sense of camaraderie with them. You have both spent the day processing the sun, turning light into life. The cottage feels more like a living organism than a building. The stone breathes, the wood settles, and the honey pulse within its terracotta skin. You are the heart of this organism, providing the motion that keeps the sweetness from stagnating. You watch the way the dying light catches the surface of the vat one last time before the sun slips below the hills. For a few seconds, the honey is transformed into a pool of glowing copper. The furrows you carve with the paddle create deep, dark valleys of shadow, making the vat look like a map of a mountain range you have yet to explore. It is a moment of profound, wordless beauty in this century. Such moments are not captured with a lens or a pen. They are captured in the memory and the muscle. You hold the image of the golden swirl in your mind, a private masterpiece that will soon be hidden away in the dark of a jar. You give the paddle a final, slow rotation, feeling the incredible silkiness of the cream. The work of the sun and the hand is nearly complete, and the peace of the 13th century night is ready to descend. The twilight has now fully claimed the corners of the stone kitchen, turning the bundles of drying herbs into dark skeletal silhouettes against the ceiling. The air has grown remarkably still, as if the entire world of 1250 is holding its breath before the onset of night. You stand before the vat, your hands still resting on the olive wood handle, feeling the cooling pulse of the honey. The resistance is now so great that you must use your entire body to make the paddle move. It is a slow, heavy grind, a tactile struggle that grounds you in the present moment. Each rotation feels like an ancient conversation between the laborer and the fruit of the land. The honey has transitioned from a flowing liquid into a dense, luxurious paste, a transformation that feels like magic, yet is simply the result of cold stone and a steady hand. In the dim light, the color of the honey has deepened into a rich, burnished bronze. It no longer sparkles with the frantic energy of the sun. Instead, it glows with a quiet internal fire. You move the paddle with a deliberate, slow rhythm, watching the way the thick ribbons of cream fold over one another in slow motion. The sound is a low, muffled thud, the sound of matter so dense it swallows all echoes. You think of the mountain passes of the Luberon, where the wind whistles through the limestone crags, and you realize that this vat contains the essence of those heights. Every drop is a distilled piece of the Provence landscape, gathered by the thousands of wings that now rest in the dark hives outside. You find yourself listening to the house again. The thick walls, which have stood for generations, seem to be sighing as they release the last of the day's heat into the cooling evening air. This cottage is a fortress of simplicity. There are no tapestries on the walls, no ornate carvings, only the functional beauty of stone, wood, and clay. This environment shapes the work. In the year 1250, there is no distraction, no noise to pull your mind away from the task at hand. This allows you to become one with the stirring. You notice the way your breathing has slowed to match the pace of the paddle. Each inhale a pull, each exhale a push. You are no longer just a person stirring honey. You are a part of the ecological cycle, the final step in the sun's journey from flower to jar. A single owl calls from the olive grove, its voice clear and haunting in the crisp air. It is the sentinel of the night, signaling that the time for human toil is drawing to a close. You decide to give the honey its final deep stir of the evening. You lean into the wood, feeling the strain in your forearms and the solid connection of your feet to the cool river stones. The honey resists with a stubborn, silent strength, but you prevail, carving one last deep spiral into its surface. This spiral is your signature upon the harvest, a mark of care and persistence that ensures the honey will remain smooth and perfect. As you finally pull the paddle free, the honey clings to it in a heavy, glistening coat, refusing to drip, hanging like a banner of gold in the shadows. You set the paddle aside on the clean wooden table and reach for the heavy ceramic lid of the vat. This is the moment of closure. As you lower the lid, the scent of the honey is suddenly contained, leaving only the smell of the stone and the cooling night air. The kitchen feels different now. The energy of the work has settled into a quiet satisfaction. You look out the window at the stars beginning to pierce the dark velvet of the sky. In 1250, the stars are the maps of the soul, and tonight they shine with a particular brilliance. You wash your hands one last time, the cool water a relief against your tacky skin, and prepare to leave the kitchen to its rest. The honey is safe, the labor is done, and the sweetness of the earth is locked away, waiting for the morning light to reveal its glory once again. The night has deepened into a profound, liquid stillness. Inside the stone cottage, the silence is so heavy it feels physical, punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic chirping of a cricket hiding near the threshold. You move across the kitchen by touch and the faint silvery moonlight that spills through the narrow window, illuminating the dust motes that have finally settled after the day's labor. Your body carries the memory of the stirring, your shoulders hum with a low, vibrating warmth, and your palms still feel the ghostly pressure of the olive wood handle. In the year 1250, the transition from labor to rest is a sacred boundary. You sit at the heavy oak table, the wood cool and smooth, and look toward the covered vat. It sits there like an altar holding the collective life of the summer within its terracotta walls. You find yourself reflecting on the nature of the sweetness you have spent the day tending. In this century, honey is more than food. It is a miracle of preservation. It is the only thing that does not rot, does not sour, and does not fade with the seasons. It is a piece of the sun that you can hold in your hand during the darkest days of the winter. You think of the mountain villages higher up in the Alps where the winters are long and the snow buries the doors. When those villagers open a jar of your honey, they aren't just tasting sugar, they are tasting the warmth of the Provençal lavender, the scent of the rosemary, and the very air of this cooling kitchen. You are a merchant of light, a weaver of memories. The cottage walls, thick and grounded, seem to vibrate with the low-frequency hum of the earth. You can hear the wind beginning to pick up outside, a soft whistling sound as it navigates the crevices of the stone and the thatch of the roof. It is the mistral's younger brother, a gentle breeze that brings the scent of the dried earth and the cooling river. You close your eyes and let the sensations of the day wash over you. The mental image of the golden swirl remains burned into your mind, a hypnotic, rotating galaxy of amber that you created with your own strength. There is a profound sense of peace in knowing that the work was done well. The honey is now cooling at the perfect rate, its crystals forming into a fine velvet lattice that will delight the tongue months from now. In the 13th century, there is a deep intimacy with the materials of life. You know the exact weight of the vat, the specific curve of the paddle, and the way the light hits the floor at every hour of the day. This intimacy creates a sense of belonging that the future will struggle to replicate. You are not a visitor in this landscape. You are a part of its geological and biological rhythm. The limestone of the cottage, the wood of the tools, and the honey in the vat are all different expressions of the same Provençal soul. You take a slow, deep breath, the air tasting of the lavender fields and the cooling stone. The day is finally over, and the cottage is a sanctuary of quiet satisfaction, waiting for the first light of tomorrow to begin the cycle once more. The moon has climbed to its highest point, casting a pale spectral glow across the lavender fields, but inside the beekeeper's cottage, the darkness is absolute and comforting. It is a thick, velvety blackness that smells of beeswax and cold minerals. You lie on your pallet of straw and linen in the adjacent room, yet your mind is still in the kitchen, hovering over the great terracotta vat. In the silence of 1250, you can almost hear the honey settling. It is a slow, microscopic movement as the liquid surrenders the last of its heat to the stone floor. The great stirring of the day has left its mark on you. Your breathing is slow and synchronized with the pulse of the cooling earth. You are resting, but the honey is still working, perfecting its texture in the dark, turning into a substance that will bridge the gap between this summer and the next. As you drift on the edge of sleep, the sensory details of the cottage return to you like a dream. You feel the coolness of the limestone walls that held you all day, a fortress against the Provençal sun. You remember the way the wildflower honey looked when the light hit it, not just as a food, but as a captured moment of time in this era. There are no photographs to freeze a memory, no books for the common man to record his days. Instead, you record your life in the jars of the cellar. Each year's harvest has a slightly different hue, a slightly different thickness, reflecting the specific mood of the weather and the whims of the bees. This year the honey is exceptionally heavy, a sign of a long, dry summer where the nectar was concentrated into a potent floral syrup. You fall into a deep, dreamless sleep, anchored by the weight of the harvest and the solid, unchanging presence of the stone walls. The first hint of the following dawn arrives, not as light, but as a change in the air's temperature. A sharp, crisp chill has crept under the door, smelling of morning dew and the distant wet stones of the riverbed. You wake with the clarity that only comes from living by the sun's schedule. There is no lingering in the year 1250. The bees will soon be waking, and the honey requires its first morning turn before the day's heat can loosen it again. You step into the kitchen, your bare feet finding the familiar smooth spots on the riverstone floor. The room is a pale grey, the shadows of the rafters just beginning to emerge from the ceiling. You move toward the vat, and even before you touch it, you can feel the dense, cool energy radiating from the ceramic. You lift the linen cloth. The honey has changed once more. It is now a solid, matte gold, the surface appearing like a calm, frozen lake of amber. When you push the olive wood paddle into the mass, it doesn't splash, it cracks slightly, a soft, sugary sound that tells you the crystallization is progressing perfectly. This is the most difficult stir of all. The honey is cold and heavy, demanding every ounce of your morning strength. You plant your feet and pull, the wood groaning as it carves a path through the stiffened cream. As the honey begins to move, it releases a sudden, sharp burst of fragrance, the scent of cold lavender and crushed rosemary, intensified by the night's rest. It is a wake-up call for the senses, a reminder that the sweetness of the earth is a living, breathing thing that requires your constant, patient care. The sun finally breaks over the horizon, sending a single horizontal spear of light through the deep window. It hits the paddle as you lift it, and for a moment the honey clinging to the wood looks like a shard of the sun itself. You are back in the rhythm. The world outside is beginning to hum with the sound of wings and the distant calls of the village, but here, in the cool stone heart of the cottage, there is only the slow circular motion of the stirring. You are the keeper of the gold, the steward of the summer's end, and as the light fills the room, you feel the profound rightness of your place in the world. The journey of the honey continues, one heavy, beautiful rotation at a time. The morning light has now fully flooded the stone kitchen, reflecting off the whitewashed walls until the entire room feels as though it is submerged in a pale, cool glow. You are deep into the first stirring of the new day, and the honey has become your master. It dictates the speed of your breath and the tension in your grip. In the year 1250, there is a deep, unspoken respect for the materials one works with. You do not force the honey, you persuade it. The resistance of the thick, golden mass is a physical manifestation of the summer's potency. As the paddle moves, you see the subtle gradients of color from a pale, creamy primrose to a deep, earthy, burnt sienna where the forest nectars have settled. Each turn of the olive wood brings these layers together, creating a harmonious, singular flavor that will soon be the pride of your cellar. The cottage is beginning to warm as the sun climbs higher, and the scent of the honey is changing once again. It is losing the sharp, cold edge of the dawn and becoming rounder, fuller, and more enveloping. You can smell the warmth of the sun-baked stones outside the window mingling with the sweetness within. You think about the journey of this honey, from the microscopic drop of nectar in the heart of a lavender sprig to this massive swirling sea of gold. It is a miracle of transformation, made possible by the tireless industry of the bees and the steady, patient labor of your own hands. You feel a sense of profound connection to the landscape. You are not merely a resident of Provence, you are a participant in its metabolic process, helping the earth to store its abundance. Your movements are fluid now, the early morning stiffness having melted away into a rhythmic, productive heat. The sound of the stirring is a comforting, low-frequency hum that seems to vibrate through the very stones of the floor. You find yourself noticing the small details of the kitchen that you often overlook. The way the soot has collected in the crevices of the chimney, the smooth, dark grain of the oak table, and the way the light catches the uneven surface of the hand-blown glass jars. Everything here has a purpose, a history, and a weight. In 1-50, life is not cluttered with the ephemeral. It is built on the enduring. The honey vat is the centerpiece of this endurance, a vessel of life that will sustain you through the turning of the seasons. As the sun reaches a point where it illuminates the very bottom of the window frame, you pause to catch your breath. The honey is perfectly marbled, the creamed textures swirling into the darker amber in a hypnotic, ever-changing dance. You look out at the lavender fields, which are now a vibrant, pulsing purple under the strengthening sun. The first bees of the day are already out, their tiny shadows darting across the limestone soil. You feel a deep, quiet joy in this continuity. The work of the hive continues outside, while your work continues within. You are the bridge between the wild and the domestic, the one who gathers the chaotic beauty of the fields and brings it into the ordered peace of the home. With a steady hand, you resume the stirring, carving another slow, perfect circle into the heart of the summer's gold. The heat of the morning begins to settle into the stone, and the air in the kitchen is perfectly still, heavy with the weight of the harvest. You have reached the point in the stirring where the honey is no longer a liquid, but a living, breathing fabric of sugar and scent. It is thick, opulent, and deeply resistant to the wood. As you move the paddle, you can feel the individual grains of pollen and the tiny suspended particles of propolis that give this wildflower honey its medicinal strength. In 1250, this is the pharmacy of the common man. This vat contains the cure for the winter cough, the dressing for the hunter's wound, and the energy for the laborer's long day. You handle it with the reverence one might show a sacred relic, for you know that within this clay vessel lies the health and vitality of your entire household. The rhythmic motion of your arms has become a form of silent contemplation. You find your thoughts drifting to the great trade routes that pass far to the south, where merchants carry spices from the Orient and silks from the distant shores of Cathay. Those are worlds of luxury and noise, but here, in the shadow of the limestone cliffs, you have something far more precious. You have the pure, unadulterated essence of the earth itself. There is no gold in the king's treasury that can match the radiance of this honey when it catches the morning light. It is a humble wealth, one that is earned with sweat and calloused, but it is a wealth that feeds the soul as much as the body. If you're feeling the peace of this ancient kitchen and the restorative power of the Provençal sun, please take a moment to join our community. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and click the notification bell to stay connected with these journeys through time. Your support is the nectar that allows this channel to grow and flourish, bringing more stories of history and relaxation to listeners around the world. The sun has moved further across the floor, and the light is now hitting the shelf of empty jars. They sit in a row, their glass bellies capturing the reflections of the room, waiting for the moment they will be filled and sealed. You look at the vat and then at the jars, realizing that the stirring is nearly complete. The honey has achieved that perfect pearlescent sheen that indicates it is ready for the long rest. It is smooth as silk, yet heavy as lead. You give it one final glorious turn, watching the way the amber folds back into itself like the tide receding from a sandy shore. The work of the paddle is coming to an end, but the life of the honey is just beginning. You feel a deep, quiet satisfaction in your chest, a sense of completion that only comes from working in harmony with the natural world. The cottage is warm, the honey is perfect, and the year 1250 feels like a beautiful, eternal moment in the sun. The high sun of midday has returned, but it feels different today, as if the very air of Provence has grown thicker with the successful completion of the harvest. You stand in your kitchen, the stone sanctuary that has seen decades of this ritual, and look at the vat with a sense of profound respect. The final stir has left the honey in a state of perfect, swirling grace. It is no longer an unruly collection of nectars. It is a singular entity, a creamy golden testament to the year 1250. The resistance of the mass has reached its peak, and as you finally withdraw the olive wood paddle, the honey clings to it in a heavy, stubborn drape that refuses to break. You watch as the last thick drop falls back into the center of the vat, creating a ripple that moves with the slow-motion dignity of an ancient sea. You begin the process of clearing the surface. In this era, every tool has a dual purpose, and you use a flat piece of polished boxwood to skim the tiny, frothy bubbles that have risen to the top. These bubbles, filled with the air of the kitchen and the essence of the stirring, are a delicacy in themselves, often saved for the children or stirred into the evening's cup of warm milk. As you skim, you reveal the true face of the honey, a surface so smooth and lustrous it looks like a polished gemstone. The color is a magnificent, deep ochre, shimmering with internal lights that seem to move even when the liquid is still. It is the culmination of your labor, the physical proof of your patience and strength. The silence of the cottage is now absolute. Even the birds outside seem to have been hushed by the weight of the noon heat. You find yourself sitting on the stone bench by the door, looking out at the shimmering horizon. The lavender is a vibrant blur of violet, and the scent is so strong it feels as though the hills themselves are breathing. You think of the cycle of the year, the first cold rains of January, the frantic budding of April, the scorched heat of July, and now, this moment of stillness. Everything in the life of a 13th century beekeeper leads to this point. The stirring is not just a culinary task, it is the final act of a long seasonal drama. You are the one who has taken the fleeting beauty of a flower's bloom and turned it into a substance that can defy time. Your arms feel heavy, but it is a comfortable weight, like the heaviness of a well-read book or a long-tended garden. You look at your hands, which are stained with the markers of your craft, the dark propolis, the pale dust of the stone, and the golden sheen of the honey. These are the marks of a life lived in direct contact with the world. In 1250, there is no separation between the maker and the made. You are the honey, and the honey is you. You have poured your energy, your focus, and your very breath into this vat. As you sit in the cool shadows watching the light dance across the floor, you feel a deep soul-level satisfaction. The harvest is gathered, the stirring is done, and the sweetness of Provence is safe within the stone walls of your home. You reach for a clean ceramic bowl and spoon a small amount of the fresh creamed honey into it. It moves with a heavy, luxurious grace. When you taste it, the experience is overwhelming. It is not just sweetness, it is a symphony of the landscape. You taste the sharp, resinous bite of the pine, the delicate perfume of the lavender, the earthy depth of the forest floor, and the bright, citrusy high notes of the wild thyme. It is the entire valley of the Luberon contained in a single spoonful. This is the reward for the long hours of stirring, the aching shoulders, and the patient waiting. This is the spirit of 1250, a time when the world was vast, mysterious, and infinitely sweet for those who knew how to listen to the bees and work with the stone. The afternoon sun begins its slow descent, painting the limestone floor with long golden rectangles that stretch toward the hearth. You stand before the wooden table surrounded by the empty ceramic jars that have been scrubbed clean with boiling water and dried in the high Provençal wind. The air in the cottage is cool and still, a stark contrast to the shimmering heat haze dancing over the lavender fields outside. Now comes the final, most delicate stage of the harvest, the pouring. You approach the large terracotta vat, its weight anchored firmly to the stone floor. Even through the ceramic, you can feel the residual warmth of the sun and the dense, slow energy of the honey within. With a heavy iron ladle, you break the surface of the set honey. It yields with a soft, yielding sigh, the texture now so thick it resembles velvet-clad marble. As you lift the first ladleful, the honey doesn't drip. It flows in a thick, shimmering ribbon that folds back upon itself like molten silk. You guide it into the first jar, watching as the golden mass fills the void, driving out the air until the jar is heavy and warm in your hand. In the year 1250, there is no sound more satisfying than the soft thump of honey hitting the bottom of a vessel. It is the sound of prosperity, of a winter secured against the hunger of the frost. As you fill jar after jar, the scent of the room reaches its final, most potent evolution. It is no longer just the scent of flowers, but the smell of the harvest in its entirety. It is the smell of wax, of sun-dried earth, of ancient stone, and of the deep, dark resins of the forest. Each jar is a time capsule capturing a specific week of the summer. You notice how the color shifts slightly between the first and the last pour. The earlier honey is a bright, clear amber, while the deeper layers are darker, infused with the late-season nectars of the heather and the wild oak. You label them in your mind by the light they capture, knowing exactly which ones will be saved for feast days and which will be used for the daily bread. The silence of the cottage is profound, a meditative space where the only clock is the slow filling of the jars. You think about the villagers who will eventually trade for this gold, the blacksmith who needs strength for his anvil, the weaver who seeks comfort after a day at the loom, and the elders who remember harvests from decades past. You are the provider of their most essential luxury. In this simple room, with your hands sticky and your back tired, you feel the weight of your role in the community. You are the one who tames the wild energy of the hills and brings it to the table in a form that is pure and lasting. The last jar is filled and you wipe the rim with a damp linen cloth, ensuring a perfect seal. You take a small piece of beeswax, melt it over a tiny flame, and pour it over the top of the linen covers to airtight the contents. The room is now filled with the cooling scent of the wax, a clean medicinal aroma that signals the end of the labor. You look at the rows of jars glowing like a row of small captured suns on your oak shelves. The great vat is empty, its mission complete. You feel a lightness in your spirit that mirrors the cooling of the day. The sun has dipped behind the jagged peaks of the Luberon, and the first stars are beginning to flicker in the darkening blue. You have finished. The honey of 1250 is gathered, stirred, and stored, a sweet, golden promise kept for the seasons yet to come. Sleepy History with Wesley is a sanctuary of peace and historical wonder, using the art of storytelling to bring relaxation and emotional connection to your evening routine. The twilight of Provence has deepened into a bruised purple, and the first cool breeze of the night whispers through the cracks of the heavy oak door. Inside the kitchen the work is done, but the spirit of the labour lingers in the scent of the air and the stillness of the stone. You sit on the wooden bench, your back leaning against the cool limestone, and look at the row of sealed jars. In the dim light, they have lost their brilliant sparkle and taken on a solid, authoritative presence. They are no longer just honey, they are the banked fire of the summer, a store of energy that will outlast the coming storms. In the year 1250, this is the ultimate peace, knowing that the bounty of the earth has been successfully translated into the safety of the home. You look at your hands, now clean of the honey but still carrying the faint, sweet scent of the hive. The muscles in your forearms pulse with a dull, satisfying ache, a physical reminder of the thousands of circles you carved into the gold. This fatigue is a gift. It is the honest tiredness of a craftsman who has seen a task through from the first buzz of the bee to the final seal of the wax. You think of the bees outside, huddled in the darkness of their hives, their queen surrounded by the warmth of her subjects. You are part of that same huddle, protected by the thick walls of the cottage and the rhythm of the seasons. There is no urgency left in the world. The urgency belonged to the summer, the autumn belongs to the harvest, and the winter will belong to the rest. The cottage feels larger in the dark. The shadows stretch across the rafters, dancing around the bundles of lavender and sage. You find yourself thinking about the continuity of this life. The jars you filled today are identical to the jars your grandfather filled, and if the world remains kind, they will be identical to the jars your grandchildren will fill. In this century, time is not a line that rushes toward an unknown end, but a circle that returns to the same sweet center. The stirring of the honey is the pulse of that circle. It is a ritual of return, a way of affirming that despite the changes in the world beyond the mountains, the relationship between the flower, the bee, and the human hand remains sacred and unbroken. The owl calls again from the olive grove, its voice a soft, feathered sound in the crisp night air. You stand up, your joints clicking in the silence, and prepare to bank the fire for the night. You move with a slow, deliberate grace, careful not to disturb the profound quiet of the kitchen. As you pass the shelf, you reach out and touch the side of one of the jars. It is cool now, the honey inside having finally found its permanent state. It feels like touching a smooth, cold stone from the riverbed, yet you know that inside is a liquid sun. You feel a final deep surge of gratitude for the abundance of the hills and the strength of your own arms. You walk to the small window and look out at the stars. They are brilliant and cold, scattered like silver pollen across the dark fabric of the sky. In 1250, the heavens feel very close to the earth, part of the same grand design that created the nectar and the bee. You take one last breath of the honey-scented air, a breath that tastes of peace and completion. The kitchen is dark, the jars are full, and the world is at rest. You turn away from the window and retreat into the inner room, leaving the gold to sleep in the silence of the stone. The great stirring of the year has come to its quiet, perfect end. The night has fully surrendered to the deep velvet silence of the 13th century. You lie upon your pallet, the scent of the straw mingling with the ghost of the lavender that still clings to your skin. Outside, the Provençal landscape is a world of silver and shadow, where the limestone cliffs reflect the distant stars and the wind moves through the dry grass like a secret. Even in sleep, your hands seem to curl slightly, as if still gripping the smooth olive wood paddle, maintaining the rhythm of the day's labor. The cottage, with its thick walls and heavy thatch, has become a cocoon within its heart. The jars of honey stand in silent rows, cooling into a dense crystalline perfection that will remain unchanged while the world outside shifts and sleeps. In the early, pre-dawn hours, the air becomes remarkably crisp. It is that thin, fragile time when the dreams of the night begin to dissolve into the reality of the morning. You wake before the first light, guided by the internal clock of the seasons. Moving through the dark cottage, you feel the familiar textures, the cool stone, the rough wood of the doorframe, the dry rustle of the hanging herbs. You return to the kitchen not to work but to witness. You light a single small tallow candle, its flame flickering and casting long dancing shadows against the whitewashed walls. The light catches the glass of the jars, and for a moment the room is filled with 1,000 tiny golden reflections. You approach the shelf and lift one of the smaller jars. It is heavy, solid, and incredibly cold. Through the glass you can see that the honey has set completely. It is no longer the flowing, swirling liquid of yesterday. It has become a uniform, pearlescent cream. There are no large crystals, no jagged edges, only a smooth, buttery density that is the hallmark of a master's stirring. You feel a quiet, private triumph. The days of heat and the hours of physical strain have been distilled into this one perfect object. In the year 1250, such a thing is a masterpiece of patience. You set the jar back in its place, the sound of the glass meeting the wood a sharp, clean note in the silence. The first hint of blue begins to bleed into the eastern sky, outlining the jagged silhouette of the Luberon Mountains. The world is waking. Soon the village will stir, the smoke will rise from the chimneys, and the cycle of the day will begin anew. But for you this morning is different. The harvest is secured. The frantic energy of the summer has been tamed and bottled. You walk to the door and swing it open, greeting the dawn air. It is sharp and smells of wood smoke and damp earth. You look toward your hives, the straw skeps sitting like silent sentinels in the garden. They are quiet now, but soon the first workers will emerge to seek the late-season blossoms. You realize that your life is a series of these quiet closures. Each harvest is a chapter finished, a promise kept to the future. As the sun finally crests the ridge, turning the world from grey to gold, you stand on your threshold, a simple beekeeper in a timeless land. You carry the warmth of the honey in your heart and the strength of the stone in your bones. The great stirring is over, but the sweetness remains, a lasting legacy of a summer in 1250. You take a deep, clear breath of the morning, ready for whatever the new day brings, knowing that in the darkness of your cellar, the sun is safely stored. The sun now clears the horizon entirely, transforming the pale blue of the dawn into a vibrant, burning gold that spills over the peaks of the Luberon. The light catches the dew on the lavender stalks, making the fields appear as if they have been sown with 1,000,000 tiny diamonds. You stand in the doorway of your cottage, watching the transition. In the year 1250, this is the hour of the world's renewal. The air is still biting, a reminder that the warmth of the year is beginning its long, slow retreat, but the light is strong and hopeful. You feel the residue of the past day's toil in the way your body moves, a slow, deliberate grace that has been earned through the persistent resistance of the honey and the heavy weight of the terracotta. You return to the center of the kitchen, where the large vat now stands empty and cleaned. You had scoured it with coarse sand and spring water in the dying light of the previous evening, and now it smells of nothing but sun-dried clay. It is a hollow vessel once more, waiting for the cycle of the seasons to begin again. You run your hand along its curved flank, feeling the imperfections in the firing. This vat has been the womb for your harvest, the place where the wild nectar of the hills was transformed into the domestic treasure of the home. There is a sense of melancholy in its emptiness, but it is a fertile sadness, the kind that recognizes the necessity of endings to make room for new beginnings. On the table, a single crust of dark rye bread sits beside a small unsealed jar of the new honey. You take a wooden knife and carve a thick slice of the bread, then dip it into the golden cream. The texture is breathtaking. It spreads with the ease of soft butter, yet it holds the structural integrity of a heavy silk. As you eat, the flavors of Provence explode once more across your palate. The thyme is there, sharp and clean. The lavender follows, floral and calming, and beneath it all is the deep, caramel-like richness of the summer heat. It is a communion with the land. In this moment, you are consuming the very essence of the valley, the result of 1,000 hours of sunlight, and the tireless labor of 1,000,000 tiny wings. The village beyond your walls is now fully awake. You can hear the distant ring of the blacksmith's hammer and the lowing of cattle being driven to the higher pastures. These sounds reach you as if from another world. For you, the true work of the season has reached its pinnacle and found its rest. You begin the process of moving the jars to the cellar. Each one is heavy, a concentrated weight of sweetness that requires a firm grip and a steady step. You descend the narrow stone stairs into the earth where the temperature drops significantly. The cellar smells of damp limestone, aged wood, and the faint sweet tang of fermenting fruit. You place the new jars on the middle shelf, aligning them with the precision of a scholar organizing a library. In the dim light of the cellar, the jars seem to hold their own luminescence. They glow with a soft internal amber light, a row of lanterns against the encroaching dark of winter. You stand there for a moment, surrounded by the fruits of your labor, the cheeses, the dried meats, the crocks of oil, and now the crown jewel, the honey of 1250. You feel a profound sense of security. Let the winds howl and the snow bury the roads. Here, deep within the earth, you have preserved the soul of the summer. You turn and climb the stairs back toward the light, leaving the honey to its long, quiet sleep in the cool dark. The stirring is done, the jars are stored, and your heart is as full as the harvest. The morning has fully taken hold, and the stone kitchen is now a place of transition. You move about the room with a lightness that contrasts with the heavy, rhythmic labor of the previous days. The air still carries the ghostly imprint of the honey's perfume, but the intense, concentrated aroma has softened, merging with the smell of the morning's small cooking fire. You take a handful of dried lavender heads and toss them onto the hearth. They crackle and release a sharp, cleansing smoke that spirals toward the rafters, purifying the space after the long harvest. In the year 1250, these small rituals are the threads that sew a life together, marking the end of one task and the readiness for the next. You spend the hour organizing your tools. The olive wood paddle, now scrubbed clean and dried in the sun, is leaning against the wall. You run your thumb over its grain, noticing how the oils from the honey have seasoned the wood, giving it a deeper, darker luster. It is a tool that has become an extension of your own body. You wrap it in a clean piece of linen and place it on the high shelf where it will rest until the next great bloom. There is a profound dignity in this maintenance. In a world where every object is crafted by hand, nothing is disposable. The paddle, the vat, and the jars are all companions in your journey through the seasons, each one holding a memory of a specific summer, a specific light. Looking out through the cottage door, you see the village children playing near the edge of the woods. Their laughter drifts toward you on the breeze, a bright, carefree sound that reminds you of why you labor. Later today, you will take a small jar of the fresh creamed honey down to the village square to trade for a new pair of leather boots and a sack of salt. The value of your work is recognized and respected. In 1250, honey is the currency of health and celebration. You imagine the look on the cobbler's face when he tastes the richness of this year's thyme-heavy batch. It is a quiet form of power, the ability to bring such pure pleasure to the lives of your neighbors. You return to the cellar one last time to ensure everything is in order. The cool, damp air is a relief against your skin. You stand in the center of the small stone room, surrounded by the rows of jars. In the absolute stillness of the earth, you can almost hear the heartbeat of the land. This cellar is a fortress of peace. It doesn't matter what happens in the courts of distant kings or the markets of the great cities. Here, the fundamental laws of nature are honored. You have taken the nectar of the sky and the flowers and anchored it in the darkness of the earth. You feel a deep, grounding sense of belonging. You are a man of the soil, a man of the bees, and a man of the stone. As you ascend the stairs and step back into the brilliant Provençal light, you feel a sense of completion that is total and absolute. The great stirring of 1250 has reached its final resonance. The bees are flying, the lavender is swaying, and the honey is safe. You pick up a small basket and head out toward the olive grove, not to work, but to simply walk among the trees. The pressure of the harvest has lifted, leaving behind a clear, luminous gratitude. The world is vast, the sun is warm, and the sweetness of life is everywhere for those who have the patience to stir it into being. You walk into the shadows of the olives, a quiet figure in a timeless landscape, carrying the peace of the honey within you. The walk through the olive grove is slow and meditative, the silver-green leaves flickering like fish scales in the breeze. Your boots crunch softly on the dry, limestone-rich soil, a sound that feels rhythmic and ancient. In the year 1250, time is not measured by the ticking of a clock, but by the weight of the harvest and the lengthening of shadows. You find a gnarled tree, its trunk twisted into a spiral that reminds you of the very patterns you carved into the honey vat just yesterday. Sitting at its base, you let the warmth of the sun soak into your weary shoulders. The intense focus of the stirring has left you with a heightened awareness. You notice the iridescent wings of a dragonfly, the way the sap beads on a broken twig, and the distant melodic clink of sheep bells. You reflect on the jars resting in the cool dark of your cellar. They are more than sustenance. They are a testament to the relationship between the labourer and the land. In this century, there is no anonymity in what you consume. You know the hills where the nectar was gathered, you know the wooden paddle that tempered the sugar, and you know the hands that sealed the wax. This transparency brings a sense of profound integrity to your life. Every spoonful of that honey will be a memory of this specific afternoon, of the way the air smells of parched grass and wild resin, and of the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. You realize that your wealth is not in coin, but in this deep, unshakable connection to the cycles of existence. As the sun reaches its zenith, the heat becomes a physical presence, a heavy golden blanket draped over the valley. You watch a solitary bee hover over a stray patch of wild thyme near your feet. She is a late worker, diligent and focused, her legs heavy with bright orange pollen. You feel a surge of kinship with her. Like you, she is a builder of stores, a creator of sweetness against the lean times to come. You stay very still watching her disappear into the tiny purple blossoms. In 1250, man and nature are not separate entities. They are participants in the same grand, slow-moving symphony. You are the conductor of the final movement, the one who brings the melody of the fields into the harmony of the home. Eventually you rise and make your way back toward the cottage. The stone walls reflect the heat, but the interior remains a cool, dim sanctuary. You pick up the small jar you set aside for trade, feeling its solid weight in your palm. It is time to enter the village, to reconnect with the world of men after the solitary vigil of the harvest. You tuck the jar into a burlap sack and step out onto the dusty path. The journey is short, but your perspective has been altered by the stirring. You see the world as a collection of potentials, wheat waiting to be flour, grapes waiting to be wine, and the golden light of Provence waiting to be honey. Entering the village square, you are greeted by the familiar sights and sounds of 13th century life. The blacksmith's forge glows with a fierce orange light, and the scent of roasting meat wafts from the tavern. You find the cobbler at his bench, his face etched with the lines of a lifetime spent over leather. When you produce the jar of honey, his eyes brighten. There is no need for many words. The quality of the work speaks for itself. He opens the lid, breathes in the concentrated scent of the high pastures, and nods with a slow, appreciative smile. In this simple exchange, the labour of your summer finds its place in the tapestry of the community. You leave with your new boots feeling the earth more clearly beneath your feet, and walk back toward your stone cottage as the shadows begin their evening stretch, a quiet master of a golden craft. The return journey from the village to your cottage is bathed in the honeyed light of a dying afternoon. Your new leather boots feel stiff and strange against the dusty path, a reminder of the trade you just made, the tangible value of the summer's toil. As you climb the gentle slope toward your stone walls, you see your house not just as a shelter, but as a silent partner in the year's success. The limestone reflects the setting sun, turning a deep toasted cream colour that matches the very honey resting within its cellar. The year 1250 is moving toward its colder months, and you can feel the shift in the breeze, a sharp, metallic edge that speaks of autumn rains and the eventual silence of the hives. You enter the kitchen and set your burlap sack on the oak table. The room feels vastly different now that the great vat is empty and the jars are tucked away. There is a profound stillness here, a vacuum left by the cessation of the rhythmic stirring. You light a small oil lamp as the shadows reclaim the corners, the flame casting a warm, flickering glow across the rafters where the dried herbs hang like sleeping bats. You find yourself drawn back to the cellar door, descending the stairs once more. You sit on the bottom step in the dark, breathing in the cold, sweet air. This is the inner sanctum of your world, Surrounded by the stone and the jars, you feel a sense of security that no war or famine in the distant lands of the north could touch. In this moment of quiet, you realize that the process of stirring the honey has changed you as much as it changed the nectar. The patience required to turn the wood for hours, the strength to resist the thickening mass, and the discipline to wait for the perfect set. All of these have settled into your bones. You have become a man of measured movements and deep breaths. You think of the winter ahead, when the fields will be grey and the bees will be clustered in a tight, shivering ball of warmth. You will come down here in the freezing dark, crack the wax seal of a jar, and be instantly transported back to this golden afternoon. The honey is your memory, your shield against the cold, and your link to the sun that has already begun to flee. You climb back up to the kitchen and prepare a simple meal of broth and the heels of the bread. Every movement is slow and deliberate. There is no longer a need for the frantic pace of the harvest. You have moved into the time of preservation. As you eat, you listen to the cottage settle. The stones expand and contract with the temperature, making small ticking sounds that feel like the ticking of a geological clock. You are content. The jars are full, the trade is made, and the legacy of the 1250 harvest is secure. You blow out the lamp, the smell of the tallow mingling with the lingering sweetness, and find your way to your bed by the light of the rising moon, knowing that the earth is satisfied and so are you. The moon hangs high over the Luberon now, a sharp silver sickle cutting through the thin clouds of 1250. Within the cottage you lie in that drift of half-sleep where the sensations of the day become the fabric of your dreams. You dream of the golden spiral, of a world made entirely of amber and light, where the paddle never stops turning and the scent of lavender is as thick as the air itself. Even in this state of rest, your fingers twitch against the linen sheets, mimicking the firm grip on the olive wood handle. The transition from the feverish activity of the harvest to the absolute stillness of completion is a psychological weight, one that takes time for the spirit to balance. You are learning to exist in the after, the season of quiet that follows the season of sweat. As the first pre-dawn light touches the edge of the window, you rise not out of necessity but out of habit. You wrap a heavy wool cloak around your shoulders, for the morning air is now undeniably cold, a herald of the coming frost. You walk out into the garden, your new boots silent on the dew-damp grass. The hives are silent, the bees tucked away in their architectural miracle of wax and heat. You touch the side of a straw skep, feeling the faint internal vibration of the colony. They are alive, and they are safe because you have left them enough of their own gold to survive the winter. This is the pact of 1250. You take only what is fair, and in return, you ensure the survival of the source. The kitchen, when you return to it, feels like a cathedral of the mundane. The empty vat is a monument to what has passed. You decide today will be a day of deep cleaning, of returning the cottage to its winter state. You take a stiff brush and begin to scrub the stone floor, removing the stray drops of honey that escaped the jars and the dust that settled during the stirring. As you work, the physical exertion brings a different kind of peace. The stickiness is replaced by the clean, sharp scent of wet limestone and lye. By the time the sun is high enough to illuminate the floor, the kitchen is pristine, a blank slate ready for the indoor tasks of the darker months, the carving of wood, the mending of nets, and the quiet contemplation of the hearth. You take a small bowl of the set honey out to the stone bench in the sun. It has thickened even more in the night, the surface resisting the spoon before giving way to a rich, fudgy interior. As you eat, you look toward the village church spire in the distance. The bell begins to toll, a slow, resonant sound that carries easily through the crisp air. It is a reminder of the communal life that surrounds your solitary craft. Tomorrow is a feast day, and you will bring several jars to the church to be blessed and shared. This is how the sweetness of the hills enters the blood of the people, turning a simple agricultural product into a spiritual grace. The rest of the day passes in a slow golden blur. You move between the garden and the kitchen, your mind finally quiet. The tension of the stirring has completely dissipated, replaced by a profound, heavy sense of accomplishment. You are no longer watching the sky for rain or the flowers for blight. That time is over. You are now the keeper of the stored sun, As evening approaches and the shadows once again begin to climb the walls of your cottage, you feel a deep, soul-level readiness for the winter. The jars are sealed, the cellar is full, and the year 1250 has given you everything it had to offer. You sit by the small fire, the orange light dancing on the stone, and feel the immense, quiet beauty of a life lived in harmony with the earth. The fire in the hearth has settled into a deep, pulsing crimson, casting a glow that warms the stones and makes the shadows of the rafters sway like the branches of the olive trees outside. You sit in your heavy wooden chair, a piece of furniture smoothed by the touch of generations, and feel the profound weight of the night. In the year 1250, the darkness is not an absence but a presence, a thick protective blanket that isolates the cottage from the vast wild stretches of the French countryside. Your body, once tense with the demand of the harvest, has finally surrendered to the luxury of stillness. The silence of the kitchen is no longer a void to be filled with the sound of the paddle. It is a companion, a reward for the thousands of rotations you forced through the thickening gold. Your thoughts drift to the cellar beneath your feet. Even without seeing them, you can feel the presence of the jars. They sit in the dark, silent and stable, their molecular dance slowed by the cool earth. You think of how, in the months to come, that honey will be the only thing that remembers the heat of this specific July, when the mistral wind howls through the stone gaps and the hills turn a brittle, frozen grey. You will open one of those jars. The scent that will emerge, the ghost of the lavender and the sharp tang of the wild rosemary, will be a defiance of the winter. It is a form of time travel, a way to hold the sun in a spoon when the world is devoid of light. You reach out and pick up the small tallow candle, its flame dancing as you stand. You walk one last time to the shelf where the olive wood paddle rests. In the flickering light, the wood seems to shimmer, still imbued with the essence of the honey it tamed. You feel a strange sense of gratitude toward this simple tool. It did not break, it did not fail. It stood between your strength and the stubbornness of the nectar, bridging the gap between effort and result. You realize that in 1150, there is no such thing as a simple object. Everything, the stone of the walls, the iron of the hearth, the wood of the paddle, has a soul forged through use and necessity. The embers in the fireplace pop, sending a small shower of sparks upward. You take a slow, deep breath, tasting the faint, sweet smoke and the mineral chill of the stones. The day is truly over. The season is truly over. You walk toward your sleeping quarters, the floorboards cool beneath your feet. As you extinguish the candle, the darkness of the room is absolute, yet you do not feel lost. You know exactly where everything is: the vat, the jars, the tools, and the path to the village. You are anchored by your work, a man of the land who has done right by the bees and the seasons. You close your eyes, and as sleep finally takes you, the last thing you see is that perfect golden swirl of honey, eternal and still, etched into the memory of your mind. The transition into the heart of the night is seamless, the kind of absolute rest that only comes to those who have physically exhausted themselves in service to the earth. In the year 1250, sleep is a profound sanctuary, a place where the boundaries between the laborer and the landscape finally dissolve. You lie in the darkness of your chamber, but your spirit remains tethered to the rhythm of the cottage. The air is perfectly still, yet it feels charged with the presence of the harvest. You find yourself drifting back to the sensation of the paddle, that heavy, dragging weight of the creamed honey as it reached its peak density. Even in the depths of rest, your mind continues to refine the golden mass, carving eternal, invisible circles into the silence of the room. As the midnight hour passes, a soft rain begins to fall. It starts as a hesitant patter against the thick thatch of the roof, a gentle rhythmic drumming that speaks of the cooling atmosphere. This is the first true rain since the harvest began, and the smell of the parched earth drinking in the moisture rises through the stone floorboards. It is a clean mineral scent, a smell of relief and closure. In 125 Sivera, rain after a successful harvest is seen as a blessing from the heavens, a way of washing away the dust of the labor and resetting the world for the autumn. You listen to the water trickling down the limestone walls, feeling a deep, primordial sense of safety. The honey is dry, sealed, and safe, The rain can no longer reach it, but it can nourish the roots of the lavender for the next cycle. You wake briefly in the stillness of the rainy night, not because of a noise, but because the temperature has dropped to a point of crisp perfection. You pull the heavy wool blanket higher, the rough texture comforting against your skin. In the darkness, you can almost see the cellar jars glowing with their stored sunlight. You think about the sheer density of life contained in those vessels. It took millions of flower visits, thousands of miles of flight, and days of your own concentrated strength to produce what now sits quietly beneath your feet. It is a staggering thought, the condensation of an entire valley's summer into a few dozen jars. This realization brings a sense of humility. You are not the creator of the sweetness. You are merely its guardian, its polisher, and its keeper. The rain tapers off into a fine mist by the time the first grey light of dawn begins to filter through the shutter gaps. You rise and walk to the kitchen, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Today will be a day of quiet contemplation and preparation for the feast. You take a small piece of beeswax and begin to polish the wooden table where the vat once sat. The friction of your hand warms the wax, releasing a scent that is both medicinal and sweet. As the grain of the oak begins to shine, you feel the cottage reclaiming its domestic order. The traces of the great work are being integrated into the fabric of the home. You are no longer a man in the middle of a harvest, you are a man enjoying the fruits of his labor. You look out the window at the refreshed landscape. The lavender fields are a darker, more somber purple under the overcast sky, and the limestone paths are slick and grey. The air is incredibly fresh, tasting of ozone and wet herbs. You see a single bee, confused by the sudden dampness, clinging to a rosemary bush near the door. You reach out a finger, and she crawls onto your skin, her tiny body vibrating as she warms herself. There is no fear, only a quiet mutual recognition. You are both workers of the sun, now finding a moment of rest in the cool shadow of the morning. As she eventually takes flight toward the hive, you feel a final, perfect chord of harmony strike within you. The stirring is long finished, the jars are resting, and the world of 1250 is exactly as it should be. The morning mist lingers in the hollows of the valley, wrapping the world of 1250 in a soft silver veil. You stand by the hearth, the warmth of the small fire reaching out to touch your shins as you prepare the morning's first infusion of herbs. The cottage feels solid and permanent, a fortress of limestone and oak that has held the secrets of the harvest for centuries. Your movements are no longer driven by the urgency of the thickening honey. Instead, they have slowed to the pace of the season's turn. You take a wooden bowl and fill it with fresh spring water, watching the ripples catch the dim light. There is a profound beauty in these simple acts, a clarity that comes when the great tasks of the year are laid to rest. You decide to spend the morning in the cellar, not to work, but to reorganize the space for the long winter ahead. As you descend the stone steps, the air grows heavy with the scent of damp earth and the sweet, concentrated aroma of the sealed jars. You begin to move the older stores, the dried apples and the braided garlic to the front, making a place of honor for the new gold. As you handle each jar, you notice how the light of your lamp plays across the surface of the honey. It has developed a subtle frosted texture near the glass, a sign that the crystallization is stable and uniform in this subterranean quiet. You feel like a monk tending to a treasury of light. Every jar is a prayer answered, a promise kept between the laborer and the land. The stillness of the cellar is broken only by the faint sound of water dripping somewhere deep within the limestone walls. This is the heartbeat of the mountain, a slow and steady pulse that reminds you of the deep time in which you live. In the year 1250, the earth is not a resource to be exploited, but a living presence to be honored. You sit for a moment on a stone crate, surrounded by your wealth. You think of the cold months to come, when the snow might block the door, and the fire will be your only sun. You are ready. This honey will provide the energy for your body and the sweetness for your spirit, a golden thread of continuity that will pull you through the dark into the next spring. Returning to the world above, you find the mist has begun to lift, revealing a sky of brilliant pale blue. The sun is weak but determined, casting long, soft shadows across the lavender fields. You take a seat on your threshold, your hands resting on your knees. You watch the village below begin to bustle with the preparations for the feast. There will be music, dancing, and the sharing of the year's bounty. You will be there carrying your jars, a silent contributor to the community's survival. But for now, you prefer the solitude of your own doorstep. You are a man who has mastered the art of the stir, who has looked into the heart of the summer and found a way to bottle its essence. The day stretches out before you, a vast and open horizon of peace. You have no more jars to fill, no more paddles to turn, and no more heat to endure. You are simply a witness to the passing of time. You watch the clouds drift over the Luberon, their shapes shifting like the patterns in the honey vat. You feel a deep, resonant connection to the stone, the wood, and the bees. The great stirring of 1250 has reached its final, quiet conclusion, leaving behind a world that is a little sweeter, a little brighter, and infinitely more grounded. You close your eyes and let the sun warm your face, a quiet keeper of the gold, resting in the heart of a timeless land. The afternoon sun of 1250 begins to tilt, casting the long, elegant shadows of the cypress trees across your stone path, like the fingers of an old giant. You have spent the last few hours in a state of quiet reflection, your body finally unlearning the tension of the harvest. There is a specific kind of silence that follows a great labor. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. You walk to the back of your cottage where the garden meets the wild scrub of the hills. Here the air is thick with the scent of sun-warmed pine needles and the last few drying blossoms of summer. You find the small wooden bench where you often sit to watch the bees return to their hives, and you settle into the familiar grain of the wood. In the distance, the bells of the village church begin to ring for the evening prayer. The sound carries clearly over the valley, a bronze melody that anchors the landscape in time. You think of the priest, Father Thomas, who will soon receive the tithe of your honey. He will use it to sweeten the wine for the altar and to heal the ailments of the poor who come to the church doors. It gives you a sense of profound purpose to know that the gold you stirred with such intensity will soon circulate through the veins of your community. In this era, everything is connected. Your sweat becomes the honey becomes the medicine, and the medicine becomes the strength of the village. It is a holy circle, unbroken and vital. You look down at your palms, where the calluses from the olive wood paddle are beginning to soften. These marks are your medals of honor. They tell the story of a summer spent in partnership with the winged workers of the air. You realize that the stirring was more than a physical task. It was a form of meditation, a way of aligning your own heartbeat with the slow, rhythmic pulse of the earth. The resistance of the honey was a teacher, instructing you in the virtues of patience and persistence. Now that the jars are resting in the cool dark of the cellar, you carry that lesson within you. You are a man who knows that anything of true value requires a steady hand and an unhurried soul. As the sky begins to turn a deep, bruised orange, a cool breeze sweeps down from the mountains, carrying the scent of distant rain. You stand and walk back toward the cottage, feeling the weight of the new leather boots as a comforting anchor. Inside, you light a single candle and place it on the table. The light catches the empty vat, which you have now covered with a clean linen cloth. It looks like a sleeping creature resting after its long season of productivity. You feel a sudden sharp pang of gratitude for the humble materials of your life, the stone that protects you, the wood that serves you, and the honey that sustains you. You take a small piece of parchment and a charcoal stick, sitting at the table to record the yields of the season. Your handwriting is slow and careful, the marks of a man more used to a paddle than a pen. You note the number of jars, the color of the cream, and the predominant scents of the different batches. This is your legacy, a record of the year 1250 to be handed down to those who will come after you. You want them to know that in this year, the sun was generous, the lavender was plentiful, and the honey was stirred with love and precision. As you blow out the candle and the room falls into the soft embrace of the night, you feel a final, perfect sense of completion. The harvest is documented, the world is at rest, and the sweetness is eternal. The first frost of the year arrives with the stealth of a thief in the night, leaving the world of 1250 painted in a brittle, crystalline white. You wake to find the window panes etched with delicate patterns of ice, mimicking the hexagonal geometry of the honeycomb. The air inside the cottage is sharp and thin, smelling of cold stone and the faint, lingering sweetness of the cellar. As you step onto the floorboards, the chill bites at your feet, but you move with a calm, practiced efficiency. You go to the hearth and revive the sleeping embers, feeding them small twigs of dried oak until a cheerful flame begins to lick the soot-stained chimney. This fire is no longer a tool for the harvest, but a necessity for survival, a small sun contained within your walls. You wrap your heavy wool cloak tightly around your frame and descend into the cellar. The temperature here is remarkably stable, the earth's deep warmth protecting your stores from the sudden freeze. You hold your lantern high and the light dances across the rows of jars. In the intense cold, the honey has achieved its final, most magnificent state. It is rock solid, a dense, pale amber that looks like carved ivory. You reach out and touch a jar. It is cold as the mountain stream. Yet you know that within its frozen heart lies the concentrated heat of 1,000 July afternoons. You select a single jar for the day's use, cradling its heavy cold weight against your chest as you climb back into the kitchen. Breaking the wax seal is a ritual of sensory rediscovery. As the linen cover is pulled back, the scent of the summer rushes out to meet you, a potent, concentrated blast of thyme, sun-baked earth, and floral nectar. It is so powerful that for a second, the frost outside disappears, replaced by the memory of the shimmering heat and the rhythmic hum of the bees. You take a warmed iron spoon and press it into the surface. The honey yields with a satisfying slow resistance, curling into a thick ribbon of gold. You spread it over a hot oatcake, watching as the heat of the fire melts the honey, turning it back into a translucent liquid that drips slowly over the edges. To taste it now in the heart of the cold is to understand the true genius of the harvest. Outside, the landscape is silent. The birds have retreated, and the lavender fields are skeletal and grey under the frost. You walk to the door and look out at your hives. They are encased in straw mats and covered with extra layers of thatch to ward off the biting wind. There is no movement there, but you know that deep inside, the bees are clustered together, vibrating their wings to maintain the warmth of the queen. They are living off the same gold that you are currently tasting. This shared survival creates a bond that transcends the species. You are all children of the same sun, waiting out the darkness with the treasures you built together during the light. The day passes in the quiet, indoor tasks of the winter. You mend a torn leather glove, you sharpen your wood-carving knives, and you watch the light move slowly across the lime-washed walls. There is no rush, no pressure, and no stirring to be done. You are in the season of consumption and conservation. Every few hours you return to the jar of honey, taking a small spoonful to keep your strength against the chill. It is your medicine, your fuel, and your memory. As the sun sets early over the Luberon, casting a pale pink glow over the frozen valley, you sit by your fire, a man of 1250 who has outsmarted the winter. You have transformed the fleeting beauty of a flower into a permanent shield of sweetness, and in the silence of your cottage you are profoundly goldenly content. The winter of 1250 settles into the bones of the valley, turning the once vibrant Luberon into a landscape of stark contrasts, charcoal shadows against the blinding white of the hoarfrost. Inside the cottage, the rhythm of life has contracted to the diameter of the hearth's glow. You spend your mornings tending the fire, the crackle of burning pine providing the only music in the heavy silence of the snow-muffled hills. The air in the kitchen is perpetually scented with wood smoke and the deep, resinous undertone of the honey jars that line the shelves. You have become a creature of the interior, finding a new kind of strength in the stillness, a strength that is less about the active resistance of the stirring and more about the quiet endurance of the wait. You find yourself drawn to the textures of your home in a way the busy summer never allowed. You run your fingers over the rough-hewn edge of the oak table, feeling the indentations where the heavy honey vat once sat for weeks. The wood feels seasoned, ancient, and reliable. On days when the wind howls through the stone eaves, you take down your favorite jar, the one from the mid-July harvest, when the lavender was at its most potent. Opening it is like cracking open a sunbeam. The creamed honey has matured in the cold, its flavor deepening into something complex and soul-warming. It is no longer just sweetness. It is a dense, floral energy that seems to radiate heat from within the spoon. One afternoon, a traveller knocks at your door, his cloak heavy with frozen mist. He is a merchant from the north seeking shelter from a sudden squall. You invite him to the fire and offer him a bowl of hot porridge swirled with a generous dollop of your gold. You watch his face as he takes the first bite. The tension in his brow melts, replaced by a look of sheer surprised wonder. He tells you he has tasted the honeys of the Parisian markets and the sweets of the Flemish coasts, but nothing carries the raw, concentrated spirit of the earth like this. In that moment you realize that your labor has a reach far beyond your own survival. You have bottled the very soul of Provence, and it has the power to heal the weariness of a stranger. As the merchant rests, you return to the small window and scrape away a circle of frost to look out at the apiary. The skeps look like small snow-capped mountains. You think of the millions of tiny lives inside, suspended in a state of high-focus survival, their collective heat centered on the queen. You are the guardian of that heat, the one who ensured they had enough stores to see the spring. This responsibility is a quiet weight, but a welcome one. It connects you to the invisible pulse of the world. In the year 1250, you are never truly alone as long as you have the bees, the stone, and the stored sunlight of the jars to keep you company. The evening comes early, the sky turning a deep, crystalline indigo before the final embers of the sun have even faded. You bid the traveller good night and return to your chair by the fire. The house is silent again, save for the ticking of the cooling stones. You take a final small taste of the honey, letting it dissolve slowly on your tongue, feeling the ghosts of summer flowers bloom in the back of your throat. This is the ultimate victory of the beekeeper, to sit in the heart of a frozen world and know with absolute certainty that the sweetness remains. You are a man of 1 through 50, anchored in the gold, resting in the deep, peaceful certainty that the sun will, in its own time, return to the lavender fields. The depths of January bring a silence to the year 1250 that feels almost holy. The heavy snows have finally arrived, drifting against the northern wall of the cottage and sealing the world in a pristine, breathless white. You move through the dim interior of your home like a shadow, your footsteps softened by the thick wool socks you knitted in the late autumn. The light that filters through the high, narrow windows is blue and cold, yet the kitchen remains a pocket of warmth, anchored by the constant low pulse of the hearth. You have reached the midpoint of the long wait, the time when the memories of the harvest are most precious, and the jars in the cellar are at their most vital. You spend a quiet morning polishing the small wooden bowls you use for the honey feast. As you work, you think about the chemistry of the winter. Outside, everything has slowed to a near halt, a state of suspended animation where the sap is frozen in the trees and the earth is as hard as the limestone. Yet inside your jars, the honey is alive in its own way. It has reached a state of perfect equilibrium, a dense crystalline structure that preserves every enzyme and every whisper of fragrance from the summer. You realize that your stirring was not just a physical transformation, but a preparation for this very stillness. You were creating a substance that could survive the cessation of time itself. As the afternoon wanes, you decide to perform a small check on the hives. You wrap yourself in your heaviest furs, tie a linen scarf around your face, and step out into the blinding white of the garden. The air is so cold it stings the lungs, a sharp reminder of the fragility of life in this century. You reach the first skep and lean your ear against the thick straw casing. For a long moment there is nothing but the whistle of the wind. Then, faint and rhythmic, you hear it, the low collective hum of the cluster. It is a deep, vibrating thrum, the sound of 1,000 tiny hearts beating in unison to keep their world at exactly the right temperature. You tap gently on the side, and the hum rises in pitch for a second, a defiant signal of life, before settling back into its steady drone. Relief washes over you, warmer than any fire. They are making it, they are burning through the honey you left them, converting the summer's nectar into the heat that keeps the frost at bay. You trudge back to the cottage, your breath blooming in white clouds before you. Back inside, the scent of the room greets you like an old friend. You take down a jar of the dark forest honey, the batch made from the late August honeydew and oak resins. It is darker and more robust than the lavender varieties, with a smoky, malty depth that feels appropriate for the dead of winter. You take a small piece of dried honeycomb, saved specifically for this time of year, and chew it slowly, letting the wax and the liquid gold coat your throat. The evening sky turns a sharp electric violet as the stars begin to pierce through the cold atmosphere. In 1250, the stars look close enough to touch, like silver nails driven into the vault of heaven. You sit by the fire, the orange light flickering across the empty honey vat, which now serves as a quiet reminder of the cycle's inevitable return. You are not just waiting for spring, you are inhabiting the winter, finding the beauty in its harshness and the sweetness in its scarcity. You pick up your carving knife and begin to shape a new handle for a spare paddle, the shavings of olive wood curling onto the floor like golden ribbons. The great work continues even in the silence, as you prepare your heart and your tools for the day when the first almond blossoms will wake the world again. The month of February in 1250 arrives with a subtle shift in the light, a pale lengthening gold that suggests the sun is regaining its strength, even as the earth remains locked in a bitter grip. You sit by the hearth, the rhythmic scrape of your sharpening stone against a knife blade the only sound in the cottage. The air is thick with the scent of the winter's end, a mix of old wood smoke, cold stone, and the deep persistent aroma of the honey jars that remain on your shelf. Your stores are lower now, the rows in the cellar beginning to show gaps where the winter's hunger has been fed, but there is still plenty to last until the first nectar flows. This is the period of the great patience, the time when the soul must mirror the stillness of the hives. You decide to open one of the jars you marked with a special sigil, the honey from the very last day of the harvest. As the wax seal gives way, the fragrance that rises is different from the bright lavender of June. It is heavier, smelling of late-season sunflowers and the sun-baked resins of the pine trees. It is the taste of the year's maturity. You take a wooden spoon and scoop a thick, creamy dollop into a cup of hot goat's milk. As the honey dissolves, the steam carries the essence of the Provençal summer into every corner of the room. In this moment, the 13th century feels less like a time of hardship and more like a time of profound, concentrated presence. You are not distracted by the world, you are entirely contained within the sensory reality of your labor. Outside, the first signs of the wakening appear. A single patch of snow near the southern wall has melted, revealing the dark, sodden earth beneath. You walk out to the apiary, the air still biting but lacking the lethal edge of January. You find a dead bee on the landing board of the third skep, a worker who lived her full life in the dark, serving the cluster, and finally succumbed to age. You pick her up, her tiny body light as a husk, and feel a surge of respect for the sacrifice. She never saw the flowers she helped preserve, yet she worked with the same intensity as those who will fly in May. You bury her in the soft earth of the thawed patch, a small return of life to the soil. The village is beginning to stir as well. You can hear the distant muffled sound of a cart on the frozen road, the iron-rimmed wheels crunching through the rime. Soon the neighbours will come knocking, their own stores of sweetness depleted, looking to trade for a jar of your sun gold. You prepare for this, cleaning the remaining jars and ensuring the seals are perfect. You are the keeper of the community's vitality. In 1250, a jar of honey is more than food. It is an insurance policy against the lingering coughs of winter and a luxury that brings a smile to a child's face. You feel a quiet pride in the quality of your stir, knowing that even the bottommost layers of your jars are as smooth and pure as the top. As evening falls, the sky turns a brilliant, translucent green near the horizon, a sign of clear weather. You sit at your table, the olive wood paddle resting in your lap. You run your hand over the grain, thinking of the resistance it will soon meet again. The cycle is nearly complete. The honey you stirred so fervently months ago has done its work. It has sustained you, warmed you, and kept the spirit of the summer alive during the darkest nights. You blow out the candle, the darkness no longer a weight, but a promise of the dawn. You are ready for the spring, a man of 1250 who has kept the light, one slow, deliberate circle at a time. The air of March carries a new, restless energy through the valley of the Luberon. The heavy, oppressive silence of the snow has been replaced by the sound of trickling water as 1,000 tiny silver veins melt from the limestone peaks and find their way down to the thirsty soil. In the year 1250, this is the time of the great thawing, a fragile bridge between the tomb of winter and the womb of spring. You stand in your doorway, the morning sun finally warm enough to thaw the stiffness in your joints. The scent of the world is changing. The metallic tang of ice is being replaced by the smell of wet earth, crushed stone, and the very first faint sweetness of rising sap. You return to the kitchen to perform a task of transition. It is time to bring the heavy terracotta vat out from its winter storage under the stairs. You move it slowly, its weight a familiar anchor. You set it upon the oak table where the grain is still polished from your winter maintenance. The vat is empty, echoing slightly when you tap its side, but it represents the potential of the coming months. You spend the hour scrubbing it with a bundle of dried rosemary and spring water, purifying the clay for the new season. This act of cleaning is as much a prayer as it is a chore. In 1250, the preparation of the vessel is the first step in the alchemy of the harvest. Looking into the cellar, you see that only 3 jars of the great stir remain. They sit on the shelf like the last survivors of a golden age. You decide to take one down to the widow Marie in the village, whose youngest son has been struggling with a lingering chest cold. In this century, your honey is the most potent medicine available, a concentrated essence of life that can spark the blood back to vigor. You wrap the jar in a piece of soft wool, feeling its solid, cool presence. The honey inside has become a dense, pearlescent cream, the crystals so fine they are invisible to the eye, a final testament to the hours you spent leaning over the vat when the sun was high. As you walk down the muddy path toward the village, you notice the first almond blossoms. They are small, brave bursts of white against the grey, skeletal branches, the very first nectar sources of the year. Your heart quickens at the sight. You know that within the dark, straw-wrapped skeps back at the cottage, the scouts are already preparing for their first flights. The long vigil of the winter is breaking. The honey you stored is being converted into the muscle and wingbeat of a new generation. You feel a profound sense of continuity. You are a part of this pulse, a rhythmic participant in a story that began long before you and will continue long after the stones of your cottage have returned to the earth. By the time you return from the village, the sun is setting in a wash of pale violet and gold. You sit on your stone bench, watching the shadows of the hives lengthen across the garden. The air is cool, but the bite is gone. You take a final small spoonful from the second-to-last jar, tasting the memory of the lavender one last time before the fresh blossoms take over the world. The stirring of 1250 is nearly a memory now, but it has served its purpose. It has carried you through the dark, kept your neighbours healthy, and ensured the survival of your winged partners. You lean back against the warm stone of the wall, a quiet master of a timeless craft, ready to begin the great circle all over again. The first true day of April arrives with a sky so clear it looks like polished sapphire, and the wind has finally lost its icy teeth. In the year 1250, this is the moment of the Great Awakening. You stand before your hives, watching the first brave foragers venture out into the warming air. They are sluggish at first, their wings heavy with the long winter's sleep, but as the sun hits the landing boards, they take flight toward the almond blossoms and the early rosemary. You feel a surge of joy that is almost physical. The cycle has turned. The honey that you stirred with such devotion throughout the previous year has done its work. It has fueled this resurrection, turning the stillness of the cluster back into the vibrant, humming energy of the field. Inside the cottage, the kitchen is transformed by the spring light. It streams in through the open door, illuminating the dust motes that dance like golden bees in the air. You look at the very last jar of the 1020-50 harvest sitting on the table. It is the reserve of the heart, the finest batch you produced during that final perfect week of lavender bloom. You decide that today you will not eat it, but rather use it to prime the new season. You take a small wooden stick and smear a tiny amount of the crystalline gold onto the entrance of each hive. It is an old tradition, a way of reminding the bees of the sweetness they are capable of, a lingering taste of their ancestors' labor to guide them toward the new blossoms. The heavy terracotta vat is now completely dry and sparkling clean, standing ready on the oak table. You run your hand over its rim, feeling the cool strength of the clay. Soon it will be filled with the wild, thin nectar of the spring flowers, the white heath and the fruit blossoms. This early honey will be different, pale, almost clear and sharp with the tang of the new year, but it will lack the dense, creamy body that only comes with the intense stirring of the summer heat. You find yourself looking forward to the labor. The ache in your shoulders from the previous year has been forgotten, replaced by a restless desire to feel the resistance of the honey against the paddle once more. In 1250, a man is defined by the work he returns to season after season. You spend the afternoon preparing your tools for the first robbing of the year. You sharpen the hive tool, mend the smokebox bellows, and check the weave of your linen veil. Every object is a familiar friend carrying the patina of years of use. As you work, you think about the permanence of the stone beneath your feet and the fleeting nature of the flowers outside. You are the bridge between them. You are the one who takes the ephemeral scent of a blossom and anchors it into a substance that can withstand the winter. It is a humble role, yet in the quiet of your Provençal valley, it feels like the most important work in the world. As the sun sets, casting a warm apricot glow over the burgeoning green of the hills, you sit on your threshold and open the very last jar. You take a final deep breath of the 1250 summer, the thyme, the lavender, the hot limestone, and the tireless spirit of the bees. You take one last spoonful, savoring the incredible fudgy texture you worked so hard to achieve. It dissolves on your tongue like a prayer. With a steady hand, you wash the jar and set it aside to be refilled. The past is gone, preserved in your strength and your health, and the future is beginning to hum in the fields. You are a man of the honey, standing at the dawn of a new gold, ready to stir the world into sweetness once again. The transition into late April brings a riot of colour to the hillsides, as if the earth itself is exhaling after a long, cold breath. The pale white of the almond blossoms has given way to the deep, resonant greens of the emerging wild grasses and the first shy purples of the early rosemary. In the year 1250, there is no sound more beautiful than the returning roar of the fields, the collective vibration of millions of insects waking up to the call of the nectar. You stand in the center of your garden, the air around you thick with the scent of wet stone and new growth. Your body feels lithe and ready, the lethargy of the winter months shed like a heavy skin. The great cycle has reset, and you are no longer a keeper of memories, but a worker of the present. You spend the morning inspecting the interior of the hives, moving with the slow, deliberate grace that the bees demand. As you lift the first lid, you are greeted by a sight of pure, organized chaos. The colonies have expanded rapidly. The frames are crawling with new workers, their bodies fuzzy and bright. They have already begun to draw out new wax, the pale, translucent combs smelling of nothing but purity. You see the first deposits of spring nectar glistening in the cells, thin, watery, and incredibly sweet. This is the raw material of your life. It is the liquid light that you will eventually tame, but for now it is a wild and unruly thing, a gift from the spring rain and the warming soil. Returning to the cottage, you find the kitchen filled with the sharp, medicinal scent of the herbs you are drying for the first trade of the season. The terracotta vat sits on the oak table, no longer a silent monument but a vessel of anticipation. You take your olive wood paddle down from the high shelf. It feels familiar in your grip, the wood seasoned by the oils of a dozen harvests. You run your palm over the blade, checking for any roughness. It is smooth, ready to dive once more into the golden depths. In 1550, the tools of a man's trade are his legacy, and you treat this paddle with the reverence a knight might show his sword. It is the instrument that transforms the wild nectar into the civilized grace of creamed honey. By midday, the village bells ring out across the valley, signaling a time of communal labor. You join your neighbors in the lower fields to help clear the irrigation ditches, but your mind remains tethered to the hills. You find yourself watching the flight paths of the bees, tracing their invisible roads through the air. You are learning the geography of the new season, which patches of thyme are blooming early, where the water is pooling, and how the wind is shifting. This knowledge is the foundation of your craft. To stir the honey well, you must first understand where it came from. You must know the soul of the flower before you can master the body of the syrup. As evening falls and the sky turns the color of a bruised plum, you return to your stone cottage. You sit by the small fire, not for warmth now, but for the companionship of the light. You take a piece of fresh bread and dip it into a small bowl of the new, thin spring honey. It is floral and sharp, hitting the back of the throat with a bright, grassy sting. It lacks the depth of the 1 through 50 harvest, but it carries the excitement of the beginning. You chew slowly, looking at the empty jars waiting in the shadows of the cellar. The great work is starting again. The first stirring is only weeks away, and as you close your eyes, you can already feel the resistance of the gold against the wood, the slow, eternal circle that defines your life in this timeless land. The month of May in 1250 arrives with a heat that feels younger and more playful than the heavy furnace of August. The Luberon is no longer a sketch of grey and brown. It is a lush, vibrating tapestry of life. You wake each morning to a chorus of birds that seems to shake the very limestone of your cottage walls. The scent that drifts through your open window is intoxicating, a mixture of wild broom, early lavender, and the damp, sweet musk of the valley floor. Your hands, once soft from the winter's rest, are beginning to toughen again as you move through the garden, mending fences and preparing the wooden stands for the heavy weight of the coming honey. You spend a quiet afternoon in the cellar, where the air remains a constant cool relief. You are clearing the very last of the cobwebs from the stone corners, preparing the sanctuary for the first harvest of the new year. The empty shelves look like open mouths, waiting to be filled with the gold of 1251. You take a moment to sit on the bottom step, looking at the space where the great jars of the previous year once sat. The memory of the 1250 harvest is like a ghost in the room, a lingering scent of success and survival. You realize that your life is measured not in years, but in these cycles of filling and emptying, of stirring and resting. Outside, the bees are working with a frantic, joyful urgency. The main flow has begun. The nectar is coming in so fast that the hives seem to breathe, a warm, sweet air exhaling from the entrances. You walk among the skeps, your presence ignored by the thousands of workers intent on their task. You see the scouts returning from the high ridges, their bodies heavy and their flight paths low. They have found the first true mountain lavender. This is the signal you have been waiting for. The thin, grassy honey of the early spring is being mixed with the more complex sugars of the highland blooms. The raw material for your next great stir is being gathered, drop by microscopic drop. You return to your kitchen and place the olive wood paddle on the table. You spend the evening polishing it with a piece of fine linen soaked in a tiny bit of walnut oil. The wood begins to glow under the candlelight, the grain appearing like the currents of a river. You think about the first day of stirring that lies ahead. You know, the ache that will return to your shoulders, the sweat that will sting your eyes, and the stubborn resistance of the thickening mass. But you also know the magic of the transformation, the moment when the clear liquid breaks and begins to hold the light, becoming the pearlescent cream that is your signature. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of rose and gold, you sit on your threshold. The village below is a cluster of flickering hearth fires, but up here you are alone with the hum of the earth. You feel a deep sense of readiness. Your tools are sharp, your vat is clean, and your heart is steady. In the year 1105, 134, You look out over the darkened fields, hearing the final few bees return to their homes, and you know that tomorrow, or perhaps the day after, the first flow will be ready for the wood. The great work is reborn, and you are its faithful servant. The heat of June begins to settle into the limestone pores of the cottage, signaling that the time for reflection is over and the time for action has arrived. In the year 1251, the air has reclaimed that familiar, shimmering quality where the horizon of the Luberon seems to vibrate under the intensity of the sun. You stand in the kitchen, the great terracotta vat positioned exactly where it has sat for generations. Today is the first harvest of the new season. You have spent the morning carefully removing the heavy, wax-capped combs from the hives, the bees drowsy and content in the abundance of the nectar flow. The scent of the raw honey, fresh, floral, and still carrying the warmth of the hive, fills the room, a heady perfume that marks the beginning of your annual labor. You begin the process of extraction, letting the liquid gold flow from the crushed combs into the vat. It is thinner than the honey of autumn, a bright, translucent amber that catches the sunlight streaming through the door. You pick up the olive wood paddle, feeling its familiar weight and the smooth, seasoned texture of the handle. As you submerge the blade into the liquid and begin the first slow, rhythmic circles, you feel a deep connection to the man you were a year ago. The muscles in your arms remember the resistance, the steady drag of the honey as it fights the wood. This is the beginning of the transformation. You're not just stirring a substance, you're weaving the essence of the spring into a stable, lasting form. As the hours pass, the rhythm takes hold of you. The world outside the cottage, the politics of the lords, the rumors of distant crusades, the changing of kings, fades into insignificance. Your reality is bounded by the circular motion of your arms and the thickening consistency of the honey. You watch as the air is incorporated into the mass, the clear amber slowly turning opaque, catching the light in tiny microscopic bubbles. The scent changes too, becoming more concentrated and creamy as the floral notes are locked into the crystalline structure. In 1251, this is your contribution to the order of the universe. You are taking the chaos of the wild nectar and bringing it into a state of perfect, delicious harmony. The sweat begins to bead on your forehead, dripping onto the stone floor, a small sacrifice to the intensity of the work. You do not stop. You know that if you break the rhythm now, the set will not be perfect. You are the guardian of the texture, the master of the cream. Every rotation of the paddle is a commitment to the quality that has made your honey famous in the village. You think of the jars waiting in the cellar, soon to be filled with this new life. You think of the winter that will eventually return, and how this very movement, this very sweat, will be the source of your warmth and your health when the snows fall again. By the time the sun begins to set, casting long, golden shadows across the kitchen table, the honey has reached its first stage of transformation. It is no longer a liquid, it is a heavy, sluggish mass that clings to the wood with a stubborn, silent strength. You lift the paddle, watching the thick ribbon of gold fold over itself in the vat, creating a beautiful, recursive pattern that looks like the petals of a frozen flower. You take a small taste. It is sharp, sweet, and incredibly vibrant, the taste of the May blossoms distilled into a single point of intensity. You cover the vat with the clean linen cloth and step out onto your threshold, the evening air cool against your damp skin. The first stir of the new year is done. The cycle is in full motion and you're exactly where you are meant to be. The morning of the second day of the new harvest breaks with a clarity that feels like a bell ringing across the valley. You rise before the sun has fully crested the Luberon, your muscles stiff but waking quickly to the familiar demands of the craft. Inside the kitchen, the air has cooled and the honey in the vat has begun its silent, molecular settling. You remove the linen cover, and the scent that rises is now more complex. It has lost the raw, aggressive edge of the field and gained a sophisticated, buttery depth. This is the stage where the honey begins to understand its new form. You take the olive wood paddle and plunge it back into the heart of the mass. The resistance is immediate and firm, requiring you to lean your entire body into the first few rotations to break the surface tension. As you stir, you look out through the open door toward the horizon. The year 1251 is proving to be a generous one. The rainfall in April has resulted in a carpet of wild thyme and sage that stretches as far as the eye can see. You can see your bees already moving in dark, purposeful streaks against the pale sky, heading for the high ridges. There is a profound sense of partnership in this moment. They provide the raw materials of the sun and the earth, and you provide the human will and the steady rhythm to preserve it. Your movements become more fluid as the honey warms under the friction of the paddle. The sound changes from a sharp splash to a deep, resonant thrum, the sound of a substance becoming soul. By midday, the heat in the cottage is intense, but you find a strange comfort in it. The sweat is a lubricant for your labor, a sign that you are fully engaged with the physical reality of the 13th century. You are not just a spectator of life, you are a participant in its most basic alchemy. You think of the local monks who spend their days illuminating manuscripts, their gold leaf shimmering on the vellum. You feel that your work is not so different. You are also illuminating something, turning the dark, hidden nectar of the flowers into a visible golden glory that will survive the winter. Every circle you carve into the vat is a line of poetry written in sugar and wax. In the afternoon, a small group of children from the village stops by the gate, their eyes wide as they catch the scent drifting from your door. You take the paddle out of the vat, a heavy, globulous mass of creamed gold clinging to the blade, and you let them each take a small lick from a clean wooden splinter. The look of pure, unadulterated joy on their faces is your true payment. In this era, sweetness is rare and sacred. A glimpse of the divine in a world of hard stone and rough wool. You watch them skip away, their spirits lifted by the work of your hands, and you return to the vat with a renewed sense of purpose. The stirring is not just for you, it is for the life of the valley. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the limestone walls of the cottage in shades of burnt sienna, you feel the honey reach a state of near perfection. It is so thick now that the paddle can almost stand upright on its own, supported by the sheer density of the crystals. You perform one final deep rotation, feeling the power of the earth moving through your arms. You cover the vat once more, the linen cloth a white shroud over the golden treasure. You walk out to your stone bench, your heart beating in a slow, satisfied rhythm. The harvest of 1251 is well underway, and as you watch the first stars appear, you know that you have captured the very best of the day, locking it forever within the heart of the gold. The third day of the 1251 harvest brings the finality of the first batch. The honey in the vat has reached that transcendent state of creaminess where it no longer behaves like a liquid, but like a soft, pliable stone. You wake to a kitchen that smells like the inside of a flower, a dense and suffocating sweetness that is the hallmark of a successful set. As you approach the vat and pull back the linen cloth, the surface is perfectly smooth, a matte landscape of pale amber that doesn't ripple when you nudge the table. You take the olive wood paddle for one last heavy session. The resistance is massive. It feels as though you're stirring the very foundation of the cottage itself. Each rotation is a slow, grinding victory, a physical dialogue between your muscles and the stubborn crystalline structure of the honey. You begin the process of jarring, a task that requires a different kind of focus. In 1251, your glass and ceramic vessels are precious, and each one must be filled with a steady hand to avoid air pockets. You use a small, silver-plated ladle, an heirloom from your grandfather, to lift the thick ribbons of gold from the vat and guide them into the jars. The honey folds over itself in the containers, creating a series of concentric waves that will eventually settle into a solid, velvet mass. As you seal each jar with a layer of clean linen and a drip of beeswax, you feel a sense of profound relief. The transition from the vulnerability of the vat to the safety of the jar is the final act of the guardian. These jars will soon descend into the cool sanctuary of... In this era, every tool has a dual purpose, and you use a flat piece of polished boxwood to skim the tiny, frothy bubbles that have risen to the top. These bubbles, filled with the air of the kitchen and the essence of the stirring, are a delicacy in themselves, often saved for the children or stirred into the evening's cup of warm milk. As you skim, you reveal the true face of the honey, a surface so smooth and lustrous it looks like a polished gemstone. The color is a magnificent deep ochre, shimmering with internal lights that seem to move even when the liquid is still. It is the culmination of your labor, the physical proof of your patience and strength. The silence of the cottage is now absolute. Even the birds outside seem to have been hushed by the weight of the noon heat. You find yourself sitting on the stone bench by the door, looking out at the shimmering horizon. The lavender is a vibrant blur of violet, and the scent is so strong it feels as though the hills themselves are breathing. You think of the cycle of the year, the first cold rains of January, the frantic budding of April, the scorched heat of July, and now, this moment of stillness. Everything in the life of a 13th century beekeeper leads to this point. The stirring is not just a culinary task, it is the final act of a long seasonal drama. You are the one who has taken the fleeting beauty of a flower's bloom and turned it into a substance that can defy time. Your arms feel heavy, but it is a comfortable weight, like the heaviness of a well-read book or a long-tended garden. You look at your hands, which are stained with the markers of your craft, the dark propolis, the pale dust of the stone, and the golden sheen of the honey. These are the marks of a life lived in direct contact with the world. In 1250, there is no separation between the maker and the made. You are the honey, and the honey is you. You have poured your energy, your focus, and your very breath into this vat. As you sit in the cool shadows, watching the light dance across the floor, you feel a deep soul-level satisfaction. The harvest is gathered, the stirring is done, and the sweetness of Provence is safe within the stone walls of your home. You reach for a clean ceramic bowl and spoon a small amount of the fresh creamed honey into it. It moves with a heavy, luxurious grace. When you taste it, the experience is overwhelming. By the time the sun is high, the oak table is lined with rows of sealed gold, reflecting the afternoon light like a collection of captured lanterns. You wipe the sweat from your brow with the back of a sticky hand and look out at the landscape. The heat is shimmering over the lavender rows, and the air is thick with the hum of a billion wings. You realize that while you have finished this first batch, the bees have already filled another 3 hives. There is no such thing as a finished job in the height of the summer. There is only the rhythm of the work and the brief pauses in between. You take a moment to wash the vat with boiling spring water, the steam rising up to cleanse the room of its heavy, sugary scent, preparing the clay for the next influx of nectar. In the late afternoon, you sit on your threshold, eating a piece of dark rye bread spread with the remnants from the bottom of the vat. The taste is explosive, a mixture of the wild thyme that bloomed last week and the deep resinous pine that the bees have been visiting in the higher reaches of the Luberon. It is the taste of the present moment, raw and unfiltered. You watch a hawk circling in the thermal currents above the cliffs, its wings motionless as it rides the heat. You feel a similar sense of suspension. You are caught in the beautiful, demanding machinery of the seasons. A man whose life is dictated by the flow of nectar and the hardening of crystals. As the shadows begin to stretch toward the village, you carry the first tray of jars down into the cellar. The transition from the baking heat of the kitchen to the damp, mineral chill of the earth is a shock to the senses. You place the jars on the stone shelves. Their surfaces cool to the touch within minutes. Here in the dark, the honey will complete its journey, maturing into the medicine and the luxury that will define your winter. You stand in the silence of the cellar for a long moment, listening to the earth breathe. You have done your part. You have steered the sun's energy into the jars, and for today, that is enough. You climb the stairs back into the fading light, ready to wake tomorrow and begin the stir all over again. The middle of June in 1251 brings a relentless dry heat that seems to bake the very essence of the Provençal herbs into a concentrated vapor. You stand before the second vat of the season, your hands gripped tightly around the olive wood paddle. This batch is different. The bees have spent the last fortnight gorging on the high-altitude lavender and the wild savory that clings to the limestone cracks. The nectar they brought back was dark, almost copper in the sunlight, and as it begins to set in the terracotta vessel, it offers a resistance that is far more stubborn than the first spring flow. You find yourself leaning your chest against the end of the paddle, using your body weight to force the wood through the thickening mass. Every rotation is a slow, rhythmic grind, the sound of the honey shifting against the clay like the heavy sigh of the earth itself. In the year 1251, There are no shortcuts to quality. You understand that the velvet texture of your creamed gold is a direct result of this physical struggle. If you were to stop now, the crystals would grow large and jagged, leaving the honey gritty on the tongue. To achieve that pearlescent, butter-like consistency, you must break the crystal chains again and again, forcing them to remain microscopic. Your breath comes in ragged bursts, and the smell of the room is so thick with floral sugars that it feels like you're breathing a liquid. You watch the surface of the honey begin to lose its glassy sheen, taking on a matte satin finish that signals the birth of the cream. It is a moment of profound satisfaction, a sign that the alchemy is working and that the wild energy of the mountain is being tamed by your steady hand. As you work, your mind drifts to the village market that will take place in 3 days' time. You know that the merchants from Avignon will be looking for your mark, the small sun etched into the beeswax seal. They prize your honey not just for its sweetness, but for its stability. It is known to stay creamy and spreadable even in the depths of a frozen winter. This reputation is built on the very ache you feel in your shoulders right now. You are not just a harvester, you are an engineer of texture. You take a moment to wipe the sweat from your eyes with a clean linen cloth, never letting the paddle go still for too long. In 1251, the continuity of the motion is everything. The honey is a living thing, and it demands your constant presence. By late afternoon, the honey has reached a state of such density that it begins to pull away from the sides of the vat as you stir, leaving clean trails in the clay. It has become a heavy dough-like substance, glowing with a deep inner light. You perform the test of the ribbon, lifting the paddle high and watching as the honey falls back into the vat. It does not splash, it folds in heavy architectural layers, holding its shape for several seconds before slowly merging with the mass. This is the peak. This is the moment of perfection. You begin the laborious process of transferring it into the smaller stoneware pots, each one a heavy weight in your hand. The sun is dipping behind the cliffs of the Luberon, casting the kitchen in a dramatic orange glow that makes the honey look like molten lava. When the last pot is sealed and the vat is finally scraped clean, you walk out to the well to wash. The cold water against your heated skin is a shock that brings you back to the world. You look up at the sky where the first stars are beginning to pulse through the heat haze. Your body is exhausted, your muscles humming with the after effects of the stir, but your spirit is light. You have successfully captured the peak of the midsummer bloom. In the cellar below, the rows of pots are growing, a silent army of sweetness that will march through the coming year. You return to the cottage, blowing out the single tallow candle, and fall into a dreamless sleep, the smell of lavender and warm wax, still clinging to your skin like a blessing. The peak of July in 1251 arrives with a stillness so profound it feels as though the entire valley is holding its breath. The sun is a relentless golden hammer, beating the limestone cliffs into a white-hot glare that forces the cicadas into a rhythmic, deafening frenzy. You move through the kitchen with a slow, practiced economy of motion, the heat having long since become a part of your skin. On the oak table, the third great vat of the season sits ready. This is the heart of the harvest, the batch that will contain the most concentrated essence of the high summer lavender. The honey you extracted this morning is a deep, glowing gold, so thick it barely wanted to leave the comb, smelling of sun-scorched earth and the heavy sweet musk of the bees. You take up the olive wood paddle, your palms finding the familiar grooves where your grip has worn the wood smooth over the years. As you begin the first slow rotations, the resistance of the honey is almost startling. It is not a liquid today, it is a heavy living weight that pushes back against every inch of your progress. You plant your feet firmly on the stone floor, feeling the cool earth beneath you as an anchor. The stir begins in your legs, moves through your core, and finally expresses itself in the steady circular path of the paddle. In the year 1251, there is no separation between the man and the work. You are the engine of this transformation, the singular force that prevents the wild sugar from turning into brittle glass. Hours pass in a blur of golden light and rhythmic effort. The interior of the cottage has become a sanctuary of scent. As the air is folded into the honey, the color begins to shift from a translucent copper to a pale, opaque cream. It is a slow-motion sunrise within the clay walls of the vat. You watch for the turning of the grain, that magical moment when the texture suddenly changes from sticky to velvet. Your shoulders burn with a dull, familiar fire, but you find a strange peace in the discomfort. It is the price of the gold. You think of the monks in the valley who spend their lives in silent prayer, and you realize that your stirring is its own form of devotion, a physical prayer for the sustenance and sweetness of your people. By mid-afternoon, the honey has reached a state of magnificent density. When you pull the paddle through the mass, it leaves a deep, permanent wake that only slowly fills in, like a path cut through fresh snow. The sheen on the surface has become matte and pearlescent, catching the shifting light of the afternoon in a way that makes the vat seem to glow from within. You know that this batch will be the finest of the year. It carries the peak intensity of the sun and the absolute maturity of the flowers. You begin the process of filling the jars, each one a heavy, satisfying vessel of liquid thyme. You seal them with the wax of the very bees that gathered the nectar, closing the circle of the season with a final firm press of your thumb. As the sun finally begins to drop toward the jagged horizon of the Luberon, the air outside softens into a bruised violet. You carry the last of the day's work down into the cool dark of the cellar. The temperature drop is a benediction, the smell of damp stone and maturing honey wrapping around you like a heavy cloak. You place the new jars on the shelves, lining them up with the precision of a scholar organizing a library. These are the volumes of your life, the stories of the fields told in sweetness and texture. You stand there for a moment in the near darkness, your breath slowing, feeling the immense weight of the gold surrounding you. The great stir of 102051 continues, but for today the sun has set, the honey is safe, and the earth is at rest. The late August sun of 1251 hangs low and heavy, a swollen amber orb that seems to mirror the very substance of your life's work. You stand in the doorway of your cottage, looking out over a valley that has been drained of its vibrant greens, replaced by the hushed golden-brown tones of the coming autumn. The air is still carrying the scent of parched grass and the final, lingering breath of the mountain thyme. This is the end of the great labor. The terracotta vat, now empty and scrubbed to a pristine sheen, sits in the corner of the room like a silent witness to the months of sweat and rhythm. You have completed the final stir of the season, and the last of the creamed gold has been tucked away into the deep, cool silence of the earth. You descend the cellar stairs one last time, holding a single tallow candle that casts long, dancing shadows against the stone walls. The sight before you is the culmination of your existence in this year of grace. Hundreds of jars and pots stand in perfect silent ranks, their wax seals bearing the mark of your thumb. You run your hand over the cool lids, feeling the immense collective weight of the harvest. There is enough here to heal every cough in the village, to sweeten every wedding feast, and to sustain your own spirit through the biting winters to come. This cellar is no longer just a storage room. It is a treasury of light, a stone vault filled with the captured energy of 1,000 summer days. You have successfully translated the fleeting beauty of the flowers into a permanent legacy of sweetness. Returning to the surface, you take your olive wood paddle from the table. It is darker now, seasoned by the oils of the honey and the salt of your palms, a tool that has become an extension of your own skeletal frame. You walk to the high shelf and lay it to rest. For the next few months, it will not feel the resistance of the gold. It will wait in the shadows, dreaming of the next spring flow. You feel a strange hollow lightness in your arms, the ghost of the motion still lingering in your muscles, a rhythmic echo of the millions of circles you have traced in the clay. You are a man who has fulfilled his contract with the earth. You have taken what was given by the sun and the bees, and through the sheer persistence of your will, you have made it eternal. As twilight falls, the first stars of the late summer begin to pierce the violet canopy. You sit on your stone bench, watching the shadows of the hives stretch out toward the darkening woods. The bees are silent now, tucked away in their straw citadels, living off the very treasure you helped them perfect. The great cycle of 1251 is closing its loop. You take a small piece of bread and a final spoonful of the honey, not for strength, but as a communion with the season. The taste is profound. It is the heat of June, the storms of July, and the stillness of August all at once. It is the history of the valley condensed into a single velvet moment on your tongue. The fire in the hearth flickers out, leaving only a glowing bed of embers that pulse like a dying star. You lean your head back against the warm limestone of the cottage, closing your eyes as the cool mountain breeze begins to stir the trees. There is nothing left to be done. The jars are full, the tools are clean, and the gold is set. You are the keeper of the sweetness, a solitary master of a timeless craft, resting at the edge of the world. As the night deepens and the silence of the Luberon wraps around you, you let out a long, satisfied breath. The harvest is over. The work is good. And in the heart of the 13th century, you are finally perfectly at peace.
Sleepy History with Tales is created for relaxation, entertainment, and sleep purposes. The stories shared on this channel are inspired by historical events, daily life, and real periods in history, but they may be simplified, adapted, or narrated in a calming way to enhance the listening experience. This content is not intended to be a precise academic or educational source. While we aim to stay generally accurate, some details may be altered for storytelling flow and relaxation. Please do not rely on this channel as a primary source for historical research or study. By listening, you acknowledge that this content is designed to help you unwind, relax, and fall asleep. Thank you for your understanding and support.